Chapter 1. The Smell Under the Straw. The hearing sign slightly askew on the employee entrance gate promised opportunity. Pip clutched the strap of his thin backpack, the worn canvas rough against his palm. Park Services assistant. It sounded better than pushing a broom, which he suspected was 90% of the job. Still, it was a job. Rent loomed. He pushed the buzzer. A tinny voice crackled, "Name." "Pip," he answered, trying to inject confidence he didn't possess into the single syllable. "First day, Park Services." A sharp buzz unlocked the gate. Pip pushed it open, stepping onto asphalt already warming under the mid-morning sun. Ahead, the cheerful, cartoonish spires of the amusement park's main street pierced the blue sky. Closer, the reality was less magical. Overflowing dumpsters, stacked pallets of chemical cleaners, the low hum of industrial air conditioning units. He followed a faded yellow line painted on the pavement towards a squat, windowless building marked Operations. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed aggressively, reflecting off linoleum floors that might have been white once. A woman with severe gray hair pinned tightly behind a desk glanced up. "Pip." "Yes, ma'am." She slid a laminated badge and a gray polo shirt across the counter. The shirt bore the park's relentlessly grinning mascot logo. "Croft wants to see you. End of the hall." She pointed with her pen before returning to her paperwork. Dismissal absolute. Manager Croft's office was small, cramped with filing cabinets and rolled-up blueprints. Croft himself was a man who seemed permanently braced for bad news, his shoulders hunched, his eyes darting. He gave Pip a handshake that felt like briefly holding a cold fish. "Pip," Croft said, consulting a sheet on his desk. "Right, sanitation crew, you're starting under Mac, night shift mostly, but you'll train days first. Jago will show you the ropes for the organics route." He waved a vague hand. "Specific protocols there, very specific. Jago knows them, listen to Jago." Croft picked up his phone, already dialing. "Report to the paddock outpost. Ask for Jago, don't be late, don't make messes, don't get lost." The call connected, and Croft turned away, his conversation about quarterly budgets instantly erasing Pip from the room. The paddock outpost turned out to be a glorified shed tucked behind the petting zoo, cleverly hidden from guest view by artificial rock formations and dense shrubbery. The air here hung thick with the scent of hay, manure, and something else. Something sharp, metallic, vaguely unpleasant underneath the farm odors. Pip wrinkled his nose. He found an older man meticulously cleaning mud off a pair of rubber boots with a stiff brush. The man wore the same gray polo, faded and stained, stretched over a sturdy frame. His face was weathered, etched with deep lines, his eyes pale blue and tired. "Excuse me," Pip ventured. "Are you Jago?" The man stopped brushing, looking Pip up and down slowly. "Might be. You the new broom?" "Pip, Mr. Croft sent me, for the organics route." Jago grunted, resuming his scrubbing with deliberate strokes. "Organics. Croft calls it that. Fancy name." He pointed the brush towards a heavy steel door set into the concrete base of the artificial hill behind the shed. "Route starts down there. Grab a cart." Against the shed wall stood several heavy-duty plastic carts, like oversized wheelbarrows with lids. Pip selected one. Its wheels rumbled loudly on the concrete as he pushed it towards the steel door. Jago produced a ring of keys, selecting a large, brass one. The lock mechanism clunked heavily. "Rule 1, Jago said, pulling the heavy door open just enough to slip through. "Keep this locked, always coming in, going out, no exceptions." He didn't wait for an answer, disappearing into the gloom beyond the door. Pip hesitated. The smell intensified as the door opened, the sharp undertone becoming more pronounced. Decay. He pushed the cart forward, the slight incline making it difficult. He squeezed through the opening Jago held. The door slammed shut behind him with a heavy, final sound, plunging them into near darkness before Jago flicked a switch. A string of bare, caged bulbs sputtered to life, casting weak yellow pools of light down a descending concrete ramp. The air was cool, damp, carrying the scent of wet earth, mildew, and that pervasive, sickly sweet odor of decomposition. Water dripped rhythmically somewhere ahead. The walls were rough concrete, stained with patches of darkness that Pip didn't want to examine too closely. Pipes snaked across the ceiling, some thick and insulated, others thin and coated in condensation. "This is Service Tunnel 7, Jago stated, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "Connects most of the West Side utilities. Our section," he gestured vaguely down the ramp, "is mostly for runoff and disposal access." Pip swallowed, his throat dry. Disposal. Jago started walking, his heavy boots echoing. Pip hurried after him with the rattling cart. "Animals," Jago said flatly. "Petting zoos got standards. Can't have sick ones, old ones, ones that bite. Bad for business. Bad for the brand." "So what happens to them?" Pip asked, dread coiling in his stomach. Jago stopped, turning to face him. The weak light cast deep shadows on his face. "They get retired down here." He pointed towards a branching tunnel darker than the main one. "Specific chute, goes deeper. We don't go down that branch. We just collect what needs collecting topside, bring it to the access point. Understand?" "I think so. Collect the animals deemed unfit from the zoo above, bring them to a chute in this tunnel." Pip didn't ask what was at the bottom of the chute. He didn't want to know. "Good, stay close. Don't touch anything you don't have to." Jago resumed walking, his pace steady. They walked for several minutes, the only sounds their footsteps, the cart's rumble, and the persistent dripping. Side tunnels branched off, some barred with rusty gates, others simply dark mouths promising nothing good. The air grew heavier, the smell richer, fouler. Pip tried breathing through his mouth. Jago stopped beside a section of wall where several large pipes converged overhead. A heavy-duty plastic bin, identical to the one's topside, sat nearby, lid secured. "Wait here." Jago walked a few paces down the tunnel and unlatched a small metal panel low on the wall. He peered inside, then closed it carefully. He did the same with another panel further down. "Checks. Gotta make sure nothing's backed up." Pip shifted his weight, trying not to stare into the oppressive darkness of the branching tunnels. He felt watched, ridiculous. It was just a damp concrete tube beneath a theme park, but the silence between the drips seemed charged, expectant. He thought he heard something, a faint scraping sound like claws on concrete from deeper within the network. He strained his ears. Nothing. Just the drip, drip, drip. Jago returned. All right, routine pickup first. Hay bales mostly, soiled bedding, standard stuff. He led Pip back up the ramp, the transition from the cool, damp tunnel air to the warm, manure-scented air of the petting zoo grounds jarring. The zoo area was deceptively cheerful. Brightly painted fences enclosed pens of docile-looking goats, fluffy sheep, and rabbits twitching their noses in sawdust-filled hutches. Children's laughter drifted from the main park area. Jago ignored it all, his face set. He led Pip to a designated area behind the main barn, where stacks of used bedding and bags of refuse awaited collection. "Load it up," Jago instructed, his voice flat. "Don't mix the bags. Blue is bedding, gray is general trash, red." He paused, his gaze distant for a moment. "Red is vet waste, goes down the chute." Pip started work, pitching soiled straw into the large cart. The physical labor was a welcome distraction from the lingering unease the tunnel provoked. He focused on the rhythm, forkful after forkful, trying to ignore the buzzing flies and the underlying smell that seemed to cling to this area, even in the open air. Jago worked silently beside him, his movements economical, practiced. As Pip scooped up a pile of particularly damp, dark straw near the back wall of the goat enclosure, his pitchfork struck something soft yet resistant. Not straw, not manure. He pushed the straw aside. A small, misshapen bundle lay there, wrapped crudely in burlap. It was small, maybe the size of a newborn lamb. Stains, dark and wet, marked the rough fabric. "Jago," Pip called, his voice hesitant. Jago stopped working, looking over. He saw the bundle and his face, already grim, tightened. He walked over slowly, his boots crunching on the scattered straw. He nudged the bundle with the toe of his boot. A low, wet sound came from within. "Leave it," Jago said, his voice low and rough. That one goes separate." He looked around, ensuring no guests were nearby, though the area was well screened. "Put it in a red bag, carefully." Pip fetched one of the designated red biohazard bags. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the burlap bundle. It felt heavy, oddly dense. He managed to slide it into the red bag without looking too closely, pulling the drawstrings tight, securing the knot twice. The metallic, coppery smell was suddenly much stronger. They finished loading the cart in silence. The cheerful sounds of the park seemed distant, alien. Jago secured the lid of the cart. "All right, back down." The second descent into Tunnel 7 felt different. Pip knew what was in the red bag bumping against the side of the cart. He knew what the chute Jago mentioned was for. The darkness seemed heavier, the dripping louder, the silence more profound. The smell of decay wasn't just an undercurrent. It felt like the tunnel's natural atmosphere. They reached the branching tunnel Jago had indicated earlier. It sloped downwards more steeply, disappearing into absolute blackness beyond the range of the overhead bulb. Bolted to the floor at the entrance of this side tunnel was a heavy metal grate, partially covering a square opening maybe 3 feet wide. This must be the chute. Thick, dark stains coated the concrete around it. Jago didn't speak. He expertly maneuvered the cart, tipping it carefully. The bags of soiled bedding and general waste tumbled onto the grate. Most of it slid down into the darkness with a series of soft thuds and rustles. Then Jago picked up the red bag. He held it for a moment, his back to Pip. Pip thought he saw the old man's shoulders slump, heard him mutter something too low to catch. Then Jago dropped the bag. It vanished into the square opening. A final, soft, wet thud echoed up from below. Jago slammed the cart's lid shut. "Done here, let's go." His voice was clipped. As they turned to leave, Pip heard it again. A definite sound this time from the direction of the dark side tunnel beyond the chute. A faint, high-pitched bleating, like a lamb, but twisted, distorted, layered with a wet, gurgling quality. "Did you hear that?" Pip whispered, stopping. Jago froze, head cocked. He listened intently for a long moment. The dripping echoed. The low hum of distant machinery vibrated through the concrete. Nothing else. "Hear what?" Jago asked, his eyes scanning the darkness warily. "Rats, big ones down here, or acoustics. These tunnels play tricks." He grabbed Pip's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Come on. Rule 2, don't linger." He pulled Pip towards the main tunnel, back towards the ramp leading topside. Pip glanced back at the dark mouth of the side tunnel, the stained chute, the oppressive blackness. He hadn't imagined the sound. It wasn't rats. It wasn't acoustics. It was the sound of suffering given a broken voice. And it came from the place where the unwanted things went. He shivered despite the coolness of the tunnel air. The job was just a job, he told himself. But the route, Jago's route, went somewhere awful. Pip had a sickening certainty that the horrors weren't confined to the chute's bottom. They were down here in the dark. And they were listening. The dripping water sounded like weeping. The cart's wheels rattled like bones. The steel door slamming shut behind them as they exited felt less like security, more like being sealed out from a tomb that refused to stay quiet. The smell of manure and sunshine suddenly felt like a desperate, fragile lie. Chapter 2: Night Water and Flickering Lights. The park transformed after closing. The cheerful music ceased, replaced by the distant hum of cleaning machines and the lonely chirp of crickets. Floodlights cast long, distorted shadows from the whimsical architecture, turning familiar shapes uncanny in the darkness. Pip walked back towards the operations building, the gray polo shirt feeling stiff and unfamiliar. His first day shift had ended hours ago, a blur of hauling trash bags, wiping down sticky surfaces, and trying desperately to erase the memory of the red bag and the sound from the tunnel. Now, twilight bled from the sky, and he was back for the night shift. He found Mac leaning against the exterior wall of operations, smoking a cigarette, the tip glowing orange in the gloom. Mac was younger than Jago, maybe late 30s, with a paunch straining against his own gray polo and eyes that seemed permanently narrowed in suspicion or boredom. "You Pip?" Mac asked, smoke curling from his lips. He didn't offer a handshake. "Yeah, ready for, well, ready." Mac took a final drag, dropped the cigarette, and ground it under his heel with unnecessary force. "Right. Jago give you the rundown, especially the paddock run." "He showed me the chute." Pip tried to keep his voice steady. Mac snorted. "Place stinks. Always has. Waste of time, mostly. Come on, grab a radio." He pushed open the door to operations. Inside, Burness, the dispatcher, presided over a bank of monitors showing grainy, black and white views of deserted park pathways and service areas. She nodded curtly as Max signed out two bulky radios, handing one to Pip. Channel 3, Mac clipped it to his belt. Standard checks first. Perimeter fence, attraction locks, main gates. Then we get to the underground amusement park. He smirked, but there was no humor in it. The perimeter check was tedious. They rode in a rattling electric cart, its headlights cutting feeble beams through the darkness. Mac drove with one hand, occasionally pointing out a flickering light or a section of fence he thought looked iffy. He didn't talk much, preferring the crackle of the radio dispatching other units to minor incidents, mostly teens trying to hop fences or automated systems reporting false alarms. Pip sat beside him, watching the familiar park shapes warp into monstrous silhouettes. The giant teacup ride looked like a nest of skeletal skulls. The roller coaster tracks resembled the bleached ribs of some enormous beast against the starry sky. His mind kept drifting back to Tunnel 7, the smell, the damp chill, the sound. "Something wrong, kid?" Mac asked suddenly, glancing over. "You look like you saw a ghost." "No, just tired, I guess, getting used to the schedule." Mac grunted. "Night shift messes with you, but it's quiet. Less idiots asking where the bathrooms are." He steered the cart towards the paddock outpost. "All right, Jago's special run. Let's get this over with." The petting zoo area was silent, the animals presumably asleep in their enclosures. Only the low hum of ventilation fans disturbed the quiet. Mac unlocked the heavy steel door to Tunnel 7 with a key from his own bulky ring. He seemed less cautious than Jago, shoving the door open with a grunt. "Need the cart?" Pip asked, remembering the procedure. "Nah, unless Jago tagged something specific for collection, we just do a walkthrough. Check the pumps, make sure no pipes burst, see if the rats threw a party." Mac flicked the tunnel lights on. The weak bulbs flickered, casting dancing shadows down the concrete ramp. The familiar smell hit Pip like a physical force: damp earth, mildew, decay. Mac unclipped his radio. "Ops Mac and Pip." He hesitated, clearly having forgotten the name already. "Entering Tunnel 7, paddock access." Burness's voice crackled back, devoid of inflection. "Acknowledged, Mac. Standard check." They started down the ramp. Mac shone his heavy flashlight beam from side to side, illuminating stained concrete, dripping pipes, dark openings of branching tunnels. Pip stayed close behind him, his own flashlight beam trembling slightly. Every drip sounded like a footstep. Every shadow seemed to deepen as they approached. "See," Mac said, sweeping his beam across a section of wall covered in dark slime. "Just leaks, bad plumbing, place is old." He kicked at a loose piece of concrete. "Whole park's built on landfill and swamp pretty much. Everything settles, everything leaks." Pip wasn't convinced. The unease from his earlier visit intensified in the dark, amplified by the isolation. He kept glancing towards the side tunnel Jago had used, the one with the chute. Its entrance looked like a gaping black mouth from this distance. "Hear about the new guy, the vlogger?" Mac asked apropos of nothing. "Vlogger?" "Yeah, some idiot trying to film abandoned parts of the park. Security chased him off near the old Galaxy ride yesterday. Calls himself Sketchy Corbin or something stupid. Thinks these tunnels are full of government secrets." Mac chuckled dryly. Only secrets down here are how much cheap concrete they used and where the rats hide their stash. They reached the area where Jago had checked the wall panels. Mac shone his light on them. Pump access. Sometimes get clogged. He didn't bother opening them. Sounds fine. Pip thought he heard it then, faintly from deeper in the tunnel network. A low, rhythmic scraping, scrape, drag, scrape, drag. What's that sound? Pip asked, his voice tight. Mac paused, tilting his head. Sound. Don't hear anything but the bloody ventilator fans. He gestured upwards with his light towards a large duct running along the ceiling. Air handlers for the whole sector run through here, always humming, clicking, banging. You'll get used to it. The scraping seemed closer now. Scrape, drag, like something heavy, something uneven being pulled across the concrete floor. It seemed to be coming from further down the main tunnel, not the chute branch. No, listen, Pip insisted, aiming his flashlight into the darkness ahead. The beam illuminated maybe 30 feet of empty, damp tunnel before dissolving into black. Mac sighed, annoyed. Kid, it's pipes settling, it's water dripping, it's rats, it's nothing. We do the check, we sign off, we go sit in the cart and drink bad coffee. That's the job. He started walking again, deeper into the tunnel. Pip followed reluctantly, sweeping his light nervously from side to side. The scraping sound faded, replaced by the ever-present dripping and humming. Mac stopped near another junction, where a barred gate blocked access to a steeply descending tunnel. Rust coated the bars thickly. Old access, Mac said, rapping the gate with his flashlight. Solid clang. Goes down to the main sewer lines. Smells worse than Jago's pet cemetery down there, believe me. Keep this locked tight. He checked the heavy padlock securing the gate. Good. As he turned, his flashlight beam momentarily swept across the entrance of the opposite branching tunnel, the one leading to the chute. Pip gasped. For a fraction of a second, illuminated starkly against the profound blackness within, he saw a shape. Taller than a man, impossibly thin, composed of sharp angles and what looked like tangled limbs or broken fence posts. It seemed to unfold itself from the darkness, a silhouette of wrongness. And the eyes, 2 points of faint, phosphorescent light burned where eyes should be. Mac, Pip choked out, stumbling back. What now? Mac snapped, annoyed, turning his beam back towards the main tunnel where Pip pointed. The branching tunnel entrance was empty, just darkness. There was something there, right there, Pip insisted, his heart hammering against his ribs. Big, shadowy, with glowing eyes. Mac shone his powerful beam directly into the chute tunnel's entrance. Nothing, just damp walls disappearing into blackness. He walked closer, cautiously, playing the light around. Pip stayed rooted, trembling. Kid, Mac said, lowering his flashlight slightly, his voice laced with exasperation. Lights play tricks down here. Water drips, makes shapes. Your eyes adjust to the dark, you see floaters, there's nothing here. He walked a few steps into the side tunnel, shining the light methodically. See, empty. Probably a rat ran across, caught the light funny. It wasn't a rat, Pip whispered. It had felt ancient, malevolent. The scraping sound returned, louder this time, seeming to come from behind them, back up the main tunnel towards the entrance ramp. Scrape, drag, click, Scrape. Mac spun around, flashlight beam jabbing into the darkness. All right, that I hear. He drew a heavy maglite from a loop on his belt, not just a flashlight, but a solid piece of metal. Could be that vlogger idiot trying to sneak past us. He spoke into his radio. Ops Mac. Hearing movement, Tunnel 7, vicinity paddock access. Might be our trespasser. Burness's voice remained calm. Acknowledged any visual. Negative. Proceeding with caution. Mac started walking slowly back up the tunnel towards the sound, his maglite held ready. Pip hesitated for only a second before scrambling after him, terrified of being left alone. The scraping sound stopped abruptly. Silence flooded the tunnel, broken only by their footsteps and the relentless dripping. They reached the spot where Jago had checked the panels. Nothing seemed amiss. Gone, Mac muttered, shining his light around. Probably heard us coming, ducked into a side passage. He sounded more annoyed than concerned. Damn kids. He swept the beam up towards the ceiling, checking the pipes and vents. Pip scanned the floor. Near one of the wall panels Jago had checked earlier, something glinted faintly in the spill of Mac's light. He bent down, cautiously reaching for it. It was small, metallic, a memory card, the kind used in cameras or phones. It lay near a dark, wet smudge on the concrete that definitely hadn't been there when they came down. Mac, look at this. Pip held it up. Mac took the card, turning it over in his fingers. An SD card, what the hell? He shone his light on the smudge Pip indicated. It looked like mud or maybe grease. So maybe sketchy what's his face was down here. Dropped his card, scrambling away. He pocketed the SD card. We'll turn this into Croft. Let the day shift deal with it. A sudden loud clang echoed from further down the tunnel, near the barred gate to the sewer access. Both men jumped, spinning around, lights stabbing the darkness. Stay here, Mac ordered, hefting the maglite again. He jogged towards the sound, his beam bouncing erratically. Pip stayed put, heart pounding. He scanned the immediate area, the panel Jago had checked, the damp smudge. His eyes traced the pipes overhead. One of the ventilation grates high up on the wall near the ceiling looked loose. One corner seemed slightly pried away from the concrete. Had it been like that before, he couldn't be sure. He heard Mac swear loudly from down the tunnel. Damn it, just a loose pipe fitting fell. A moment later, Mac came walking back, shaking his head. Place is falling apart. Pip didn't mention the SD card again or the loose vent cover. Mac clearly wasn't receptive to anything outside his narrow view of leaky pipes and trespassing teenagers. But Pip felt a cold certainty settle over him. Someone else had been down here. Someone who knew the tunnels. And the thing he'd seen at the chute entrance. That wasn't a trick of the light. As they finally walked back up the ramp towards the steel door, Pip heard one last sound, almost lost beneath the hum of machinery. Faint, high-pitched, echoing as if from a great distance but undeniably present. A single distorted bleat, echo bleat. It sounded like it was laughing. Mac didn't seem to notice. He slammed the heavy door shut, the lock mechanism tumbling home with loud finality. Right, Max said, lighting another cigarette as they stepped into the cool night air. Coffee time. Try not to imagine monsters in your coffee cup, kid. Pip nodded numbly. the recovered SD card feeling like a lead weight in Mac's pocket. The image of those glowing eyes burned into his mind. He didn't think it was the vlogger who dropped the card near that dark smudge. He thought maybe Sketch Corbin hadn't just been trying to get in. Maybe something had been trying to get out. And maybe the vlogger had just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The night shift stretched ahead, long and filled with flickering lights and sounds Mac refused to hear. Chapter 3: Static and Whispers. The rest of the night shift passed in a haze of routine punctuated by Pip's hyper-awareness. Every distant bang, every flicker of a faulty bulb, every scuttling sound in the walls sent adrenaline prickling under his skin. Mac remained oblivious, or perhaps deliberately obtuse, humming tunelessly as he piloted the cart through deserted plazas, occasionally pointing out overflowing bins with weary resignation. He treated the tunnel incident as closed, a trespasser spooked by their approach, nothing more. He hadn't mentioned the SD card again after pocketing it. Sunrise painted the cartoon peaks of the park in soft pastels, a jarring contrast to the grimy reality of the service areas. Pip clocked out feeling drained, not just from the work, but from the sustained tension. The oppressive dampness of Tunnel 7 seemed to cling to his clothes, the faint, sweet scent of decay lingering in his nostrils. He returned that evening for his next shift feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. He half hoped Croft had reassigned him, taken him off the paddock route, off Mac's crew. But the schedule board showed his name right there. Pip Park Services Night Crew Mac. He found Mac already by the operations building, leaning against the wall in the same spot as the night before, smoking. Tonight, however, Manager Croft stood nearby, tapping impatiently on a tablet. "Don't care if he dropped his car keys or his diary," Croft was saying, his voice tight with irritation. "Policy is any found property, especially electronics, goes straight to lost and found, logged and secured, not carried around in your pocket overnight." Mac shrugged, smoke trailing from his nostrils. Figured it was evidence, trespasser. "Evidence of what? Bad taste in hobbies," Croft snapped. "Security is handling the trespasser report. That card," he jabbed a finger towards Mac, "is potentially guest property. Hand it over." Mac fished the small SD card from his shirt pocket, flicking it dismissively towards Croft. Croft snatched it out of the air with surprising speed. "It goes to L and F processing. If your vlogger wants it back, he can file a report like everyone else. Now stick to your roots, and report anything unusual through proper channels, not by collecting souvenirs." Croft turned sharply and stalked back into the operations building, radiating annoyance. Mac watched him go, then took a long drag on his cigarette. "Bureaucratic pencil pusher," he muttered, though not loud enough for Croft to hear. He looked at Pip. "Ready for another night in paradise?" Pip nodded, his mind racing. The SD card was out of Mac's hands, now logged somewhere within the park's administrative labyrinth. He felt a pang of disappointment, a lost opportunity. What might have been on it? Proof of what he saw, or just shaky footage of concrete walls? Their initial rounds mirrored the previous night, checking gates, rattling doors on shuttered food stalls, cruising empty pathways under the security lights. Pip found himself constantly scanning the shadows, listening intently over the radio chatter and the cart's electric whine. Mac seemed determinedly focused on the mundane, pointing out a leaking sprinkler head or complaining about the state of the employee restrooms. As they neared the paddock outpost for the tunnel check, Pip saw Jago locking up the small shed. The old keeper moved stiffly, his face grim in the cart's headlights. Mac slowed the cart, evening Jago all tucked in. Jago nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on Pip for a beat longer than necessary. Quiet night, animals are settled. He jingled his keys. You boys heading down? Standard sweep, Mac replied. Anything to report? Any more ghost stories from the new kid? He chuckled, nudging Pip. Jago didn't smile. He looked directly at Pip. Tunnels are old, full of drafts. Sounds carry strange, best not to imagine things. His gaze was intense, a clear warning. And best not to go poking around where you shouldn't. Stick to the main path. Do your check. Get out. He turned and walked away towards the employee parking lot, his shoulders slumped. Cheerful old goat, Mac commented, steering the cart towards the heavy steel door. Probably thinks the place is haunted by bunnies he forgot to feed. Pip didn't say anything. Jago's warning felt specific, pointed, poking around where you shouldn't. Did he know about the SD card? Did he suspect Pip's unease went beyond simple rookie nerves? Mac unlocked the door and the familiar cool, damp, foul air washed over them. He switched on the lights. Tonight they seemed dimmer, flickering more erratically. Several bulbs further down the ramp were completely dark. Great, Mac grumbled. Need to put in a maintenance request for these lights, can barely see. He unclipped his radio. Ops, Mac and Pip entering Tunnel 7 paddock. Acknowledged, Burness's voice crackled back, static momentarily drowning her out. Comms are a bit spotty tonight, Mac. Interference. 10-4, Mac replied, sounding unconcerned. Probably the storm rolling in. He gestured for Pip to follow. The descent felt even more menacing with the reduced lighting. Large sections of the tunnel were swallowed by shadow, their flashlights carving cones of visibility that seemed inadequate against the oppressive darkness. The dripping sound was louder tonight, echoing strangely. Pip kept his flashlight beam aimed low, scanning the floor, remembering the spot where he'd found the SD card. The dark smudge was still there, looking like an ugly stain on the concrete. He played his light over the ventilation grate high on the wall nearby. It still looked slightly askew, a dark gap visible at one corner. Mac was focused on checking a series of valves near the main junction. Pressure looks okay here, he muttered, consulting a gauge. That's when Pip heard it, not the distorted bleating from the night before. This was different. A low whisper seeming to ride on the currents of air gusting faintly from the ventilation system. It wasn't words exactly, more like sibilant, overlapping murmurs rising and falling. SSSSHHH, HHH here, SSS Suwon. He froze, hand tightening on his flashlight. Mac, do you hear whispering? Mac straightened up from the valves, tilting his head. Whispering? What are you on about now, kid? He listened for a moment. It's the air vents, told you they make noise. Winds picking up outside, forces air through the ducts. No, it sounds like voices, Pip insisted, aiming his light towards the unsettlingly loose vent cover. The whispering seemed stronger near it. SSSHHH. Coom. Listen. Max sighed heavily, walking over to Pip. Kid, seriously, get a grip. It's an old tunnel under a petting zoo, not a crypt. He shone his own powerful beam up at the vent. See, just an air duct, probably full of dust bunnies and dead bugs. As Mac's light hit the grate, the whispering intensified for a fraction of a second, coalescing into something that sounded almost like a choked sob before cutting off abruptly. Silence descended again, thick and heavy, broken only by the dripping water. Even Mac looked momentarily unnerved. He lowered his flashlight slowly. Okay, that was weird. Air pressure thing, maybe. He cleared his throat. Right, let's check the sewer gate and get out of here. This place gives me the creeps tonight. They walked towards the barred gate at the far end of their designated patrol route. The darkness here was almost absolute, with the nearest working bulb a good 50 feet back. Their flashlight beams danced ahead, revealing the rust-covered gate and the blackness beyond it. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from behind the gate, followed by a rapid scraping sound. Scrape, 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 clang, like something heavy striking the metal bars, then dragging itself away in the darkness below. What the hell was that? Mac breathed, aiming his light squarely at the gate. The padlock was still secure. Nothing seemed disturbed on their side, but the sounds had clearly come from the other side, down in the sewer access tunnel. Maybe something fell, Pip suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. Sounded bigger than a pipe fitting, Mac muttered. He cautiously approached the gate, shining his light through the bars into the descending blackness. Hello, anyone down there? Park security. His voice echoed, swallowed by the dark. No answer, only the sound of distant dripping water from below. He rattled the gate, solid. Whatever it was, it's on the other side, and this gate's locked tight. He stepped back but kept his light trained on the bars. Still, creepy. Pip felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The whispers near the vent, the violent sounds from behind the locked gate. Jago's warning echoed in his mind. Stick to the main path. Get out. Let's go, Mac, Pip urged, his voice hushed. Let's just finish the check and go. Mac nodded, his usual cynicism momentarily eclipsed by unease. Yeah, good idea. They turned back, walking quickly towards the entrance ramp. Pip couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen things stirring in the deep shadows just beyond their flashlight beams. The air felt thick, charged with static electricity. His radio crackled loudly, emitting a burst of harsh static before falling silent. Damn interference, Mac grumbled, fiddling with his own radio. Can't even get ops. As they passed the junction leading to the chute tunnel, Pip risked a glance into its black mouth. He saw nothing, but he heard something, very faint, almost subliminal beneath the dripping sounds. A soft, rhythmic thudding, thump-thump, thump-thump, like a heartbeat. A large, slow heartbeat pulsing from the depths where the red bag had fallen. He didn't mention it to Mac. He just walked faster, desperate for the sight of the steel door and the open air. They reached the ramp, the incline feeling steeper than before. The string of lights flickered violently, some bulbs buzzing audibly. One bulb directly above them popped with a shower of sparks, plunging their immediate area into deeper shadow. Both men flinched. "Okay, definitely putting in that maintenance request," Max said, his voice tight. They scrambled up the last few feet of the ramp. Mac fumbled with the key, his hands surprisingly unsteady as he unlocked the heavy door. He shoved it open, revealing the blessedly normal sight of the paddock outpost shed and the dark shapes of the animal enclosures under the night sky. Just as Pip stepped over the threshold, relief washing over him, a final sound echoed up from the tunnel behind them, clearer this time. Not a whisper, not a bleat, not a scrape. It was a single word, spoken in a low, guttural voice that seemed stitched together from a dozen different animal throats. "Stay." Max slammed the door shut, ramming the bolt home. He leaned against it, breathing heavily, his face pale in the dim security light outside. He looked at Pip, his usual cynical mask finally cracking. Did you hear that?" Mac asked, his voice barely a whisper. Pip nodded, unable to speak, the single word echoing in his ears. "Stay." Mac fumbled for his cigarettes, his hands shaking as he lit one. "Pipes," he said, inhaling deeply, but the word sounded hollow, forced. "Just settling pipes." He wouldn't meet Pip's eyes. The shift wasn't over. They still had hours to go, but something had shifted between them. Mac's denial had been breached. Pip was no longer alone in his fear. The tunnel wasn't just damp concrete and leaky pipes. It was awake, and it wanted them to stay. Pip thought again of the SD card now locked away in Lost and Found. He thought of the vlogger Sketch Corbin. What had he recorded before he dropped it? What had he seen? What had he heard? Getting that card suddenly felt less like curiosity, more like a desperate need for answers, for proof that he wasn't just imagining the whispers and the shadows. He had to see what was on it. He just didn't know how. Chapter 4: Lost Property and Found Fears. The remaining hours of the shift crawled by under a shroud of shared, unspoken dread. Mac drove the cart almost mechanically, his knuckles white where he gripped the steering wheel. He chain-smoked, lighting one cigarette from the butt of the last, the acrid smell mingling unpleasantly with the dew-laden night air. He spoke little, his usual gruff complaints replaced by a tense silence. When he did speak, it was clipped, functional, checking off locations on their route sheet, relaying terse messages over the radio when the static briefly cleared. Pip sat beside him, equally silent, replaying the events in the tunnel, the whispers from the vent, the violent clanging behind the sewer gate, the final guttural command, "Stay." He kept glancing at Mac, wondering if the older guard would acknowledge it, break the tension, offer some rationalization beyond settling pipes. But Mac stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, offering nothing. The fear, Pip realized, had isolated them as much as it had connected them. Acknowledging it fully seemed too dangerous, like giving the darkness permission to cross the threshold from the concrete underworld into the mundane reality of their patrol cart. When the shift finally ended, heralded by the first gray streaks of dawn, they returned the cart and equipment wordlessly. Mac mumbled a "see you tonight" without looking at Pip and walked quickly towards his car, leaving Pip standing alone near the silent operations building. The contrast between the awakening park of birds starting to chirp, The distant roar of leaf blowers from the day crews starting up, and the cold dread still clinging to him was jarring. He felt exhausted, hollowed out. Sleep, he suspected, would offer little respite. He spent the day fitfully dozing in his small, stuffy apartment miles from the park's cheerful facade. Dreams offered no escape, filled with echoing tunnels, flickering lights, and the sensation of unseen things brushing against his skin in the dark. He woke repeatedly, sweating, the distorted bleating of the echo-bleat phantom ringing in his ears. The image of the SD card, small and black and potentially holding answers, became an obsession. What had sketch Corbin filmed? Had he captured the shadow figure Pip saw? Had he recorded the whispers? Or had he recorded his own final moments? The need to see the card became overwhelming. Croft had said it went to lost and found processing. Pip showered, dressed in street clothes, and took a bus back towards the park, arriving mid-afternoon when the place was teeming with guests. Entering through the main gate as a visitor felt strange, surreal. The cheerful music, the costumed characters waving, the screams of delight from the rides, it all seemed like a thin veneer over the grim reality he now knew lurked beneath. He located the lost and found office, tucked away near the main entrance plaza. It was a small, brightly lit counter, staffed by a young woman wearing the same relentlessly cheerful park uniform, though hers was crisp and clean, unlike his own gray polo. A short line of harried-looking parents and frustrated teenagers waited, reporting lost phones, wallets, and sunglasses. Pip joined the queue, rehearsing his approach. He couldn't just ask for the specific SD card Mac had found. That would raise immediate suspicion. He needed a plausible reason. When he reached the counter, the young woman gave him a practiced, bright smile. "Hi there, how can I help you today?" "Hi," Pip began, trying to sound casual. "I think I might have lost an SD card yesterday, possibly near the Galaxy Ride area, or maybe over by the paddock side of things," he waved vaguely. "It's black, standard size, had some photos on it." The attendant typed something into her computer terminal. Her smile didn't falter. "Okay, let's see. We log everything that comes in. Do you remember anything specific about the photos or the brand of the card?" No, not really," Pip stammered, feeling his face flush. "Just photos, holiday snaps maybe. It was just a standard black card." He cursed himself internally. He should have prepared better. She continued typing, clicking the mouse. We had a few memory cards turned in yesterday. One found near Cosmic Coasters, looks like mostly ride photos. Another recovered from the Pirate Plunge splash zone, probably water damaged." She scanned the screen. "And, we did have one logged by night security early this morning. Found property, listed as recovered from a service area near Sector 7. Her eyes flickered up at Pip, the professional smile tightening slightly. "That's an employee-only zone, sir." "Oh," Pip said quickly. "Right, no, must have been one of the others then, near the coasters maybe." He could feel her suspicion. Probably gone for good, thanks anyway. He started to turn away. "Actually," she said, stopping him, "that particular card logged this morning. It was flagged." Pip turned back slowly. "Flagged?" "By management, pending investigation regarding the, unauthorized access incident yesterday." She lowered her voice slightly. It's not currently available for release. Standard procedure. Investigation. The trespasser security was looking for. They think the card might belong to him. It's locked up in central processing, not here. She gestured vaguely towards the park's administrative complex, hidden behind the main street facades. Sorry, I couldn't help. Her smile was back, firmly in place, dismissing him. Pip thanked her again and walked away, his mind buzzing. Flagged. Pending investigation. Locked up in central processing. That meant getting the card wouldn't be as simple as claiming it. It was evidence now, tangled in whatever official report Croft and security were building about Sketch Corbin. And it wasn't even stored in the public lost and found office. Central processing. That sounded like somewhere deep inside the park's administrative heart, likely inaccessible to a low-level sanitation worker like him. Deflated, he wandered aimlessly through the park for a while, the cheerful atmosphere grating on his frayed nerves. He found himself drifting towards the paddock area, drawn by a morbid curiosity. From the guest pathways, the petting zoo looked idyllic. Children petted compliant goats through the fence. Bunnies twitched in clean hutches. A miniature pony patiently endured pats from toddlers. There was no sign of the grim reality hidden just feet away, beneath the artificial hill. He saw Jago near the barn, patiently showing a small child how to hold a brush to groom the pony. The old keeper looked different in the daylight, interacting with the guests. The grimness was still there in the lines around his eyes, but it was overlaid with a practiced gentleness. Seeing him there, bridging the gap between the park's sunny facade and its dark underbelly, Pip felt a sudden urge to talk to him, to ask him directly about the tunnels, about the sounds, about the thing he'd seen. He waited until the family moved on, then approached the fence line near where Jago was putting away the grooming tools. Jago. The keeper looked up, his expression hardening slightly as he recognized Pip. "You're early for your shift." I came back," Pip said, lowering his voice. "I was at Lost and Found." Jago stopped what he was doing, his gaze sharp, looking for something. "The SD card. Mac turned it in, the one we found last night." Jago leaned against the fence, crossing his arms. He looked around, ensuring no guests were within earshot. Croft mentioned it. Property of the trespasser, they reckon. "Jago, what's really down there?" Pip asked, the question tumbling out in a rush. "Last night, we heard things, saw things. Mac heard it too, the voice." Jago stared at him for a long moment, his pale eyes unreadable. "Told you, tunnels play tricks. Old pipes, bad wiring, rats." "It wasn't rats," Pip insisted. "The whispers, the thing by the chute entrance." Jago sighed, a low, weary sound. He picked up a stray piece of straw, examining it intently. "That petting zoo," he said softly, gesturing towards the enclosures, "has been here since the park opened. 50 years of retirement." He met Pip's eyes. "That's a lot of animals, a lot of fear, a lot of pain soaked into the ground, into the concrete below." "So it is haunted." "Haunted," Jago gave a short, harsh laugh that held no amusement. "Not ghosts, kid, not like in stories. It's residue, an echo made of misery. All that suffering concentrated in one place down in the dark. It festers, changes things." He dropped the straw. "Sometimes it makes noise, sometimes it reaches out." Reaches out. Pip felt a chill despite the afternoon warmth. The voice. Stick to the main path, Jago repeated, his voice firm, cutting off further questions. Do the check, don't linger, don't go looking for trouble, especially not near the chute tunnel or the old sewer access. Some places, the echo is stronger, louder. He picked up a bucket. Forget the SD card, forget the vlogger. Whatever he saw down there, you don't want to see it. He turned towards the barn. Go home, Pip. Get some rest before your shift. And stay out of Tunnel 7, unless you're on the clock with Mac. Pip watched him go, feeling frustrated but also more afraid than before. Residue, an echo made of misery, festers, changes things. Jago knew more than he was letting on, far more. His warnings weren't just caution, they were born of experience, of knowledge Pip desperately wanted but also dreaded. He left the park again, the cheerful music seeming to mock him. Jago's words echoed in his mind. Forget the SD card, but he couldn't. It felt like the only key, the only tangible piece of evidence in a situation rapidly spiraling into nightmare territory, locked in central processing. He needed to find out more about this vlogger, Sketch Corbin. Had he gotten out? Was he officially listed as missing? Back in his apartment, Pip booted up his aging laptop. He searched for Sketch Corbin, Sketchy Corbin, Urban Explorer, Amusement Park Trespass. He found scattered results, low-view YouTube videos featuring shaky footage of Corbin exploring abandoned factories and boarded-up hospitals. His commentary a mix of bravado and conspiracy theories. There were a few recent posts on niche urban exploration forums mentioning Corbin's plan to infiltrate the theme park, bragging about finding a back way in near the old animal pens. Then he found it. A single recent post on one of the forums dated the previous day. User, TunnelRat88. Subject, anyone heard from Sketch Corbin? The post read, was supposed to meet up with Sketch yesterday after his park infiltration attempt. Radio silence since he went in. Anyone got eyes on him? His last check-in said something about finding access to the service tunnels near the petting zoo. Mentioned weird noises. Radio silence. Weird noises. Pip stared at the screen, his blood running cold. Sketch Corbin hadn't just dropped his SD card and run. He went into the tunnels near the paddock, and he hadn't come out. The SD card wasn't just evidence of trespassing anymore. It might be the last record of Sketch Corbin's existence, and it was locked away deep inside the park's administrative heart. Pip knew with a sinking certainty that he couldn't just let it go. He had to get that card. He had to see what Sketch had seen, even if Jago was right, even if he really didn't want to. Chapter 5. Central Processing Dreams. Pip stared at the forum post about Sketch Corbin, the words radio silence burning cold against the screen's glow. Corbin wasn't just a trespasser who lost his camera card. He was missing. Missing inside the warren of tunnels beneath the park. Missing somewhere near the paddock outpost, near Tunnel 7, near the place where Pip had seen the flickering phosphorescent eyes and heard the impossible voice. Jago's weary warning, forget the SD card. Whatever he saw down there, you don't want to see it, felt less like advice, more like a threat issued by the tunnels themselves. But letting it go felt impossible now. Corbin had gone in seeking thrills or secrets, armed with a camera. That card wasn't just guest property anymore. It was potentially the only record of what happened to him, the only clue. Ignoring it felt like complicity, like leaving Corbin abandoned in the dark with whatever dwelled there. Pip spent the rest of the day oscillating between fear and a grim determination. He searched online for park maps, trying to pinpoint central processing. Most guest maps showed only the public areas, the rides and restaurants and shops. He found some older employee orientation materials on obscure corners of the web, PDFs mentioning central processing as part of the main administrative complex, located behind the cheerful facades of Founders Lane, the park's idealized Main Street. It housed HR, payroll, higher management, and presumably a more secure evidence lockup than the public lost and found counter. Getting inside wouldn't be easy. His gray polo shirt and sanitation cart wouldn't grant him access there. He needed a plan, something beyond simply walking up to the front door. He thought about the tunnel network. Did other tunnels connect near the admin complex? Could there be an entrance from below? The idea sent a shiver down his spine. He barely survived the known horrors of Tunnel 7. Exploring uncharted sections felt like suicide. No, it had to be topside. When evening arrived, bringing the familiar dread of the impending shift, Pip felt a strange sense of clarity amidst the fear. He had to try. He met Mac near operations. The older guard seemed to have regained some of his gruff composure overnight. He nodded at Pip, his expression carefully neutral. "Ready for the grind?" Mac asked, lighting his first cigarette of the shift. "As I'll ever be," Pip replied, trying to sound normal. He decided to test the waters. "Hey, Mac, that SD card Croft took, central processing, right? Where exactly is that?" Mac gave him a sharp look, suspicion flaring in his eyes. "Why? Thinking of retrieving your holiday snaps?" "No, just curious," Pip backtracked quickly. "Never heard of it before." Mac took a drag, seeming to relax slightly. "It's in the main admin block, behind Founders Lane. Big white building, looks like a fake city hall. Why they call it central processing, I dunno, sounds like a slaughterhouse." He chuckled humorlessly. "Place is locked up tighter than Croft's wallet. Security hubs in there, management offices. No reason for grunts like us to go near it." He eyed Pip again. "So don't get any ideas." Pip nodded, feigning disinterest. "Right, just wondering." The initial rounds felt different tonight. Pip wasn't just reacting to shadows. He was actively observing, cataloging. He noted the patrol patterns of the other security carts, the timing of their check-ins over the radio, the locations of security cameras, trying to spot blind spots. He paid particular attention as they circled the perimeter behind Founders Lane. The admin complex, Mac's fake city hall, was brightly lit, presenting an imposing, sterile facade even at night. Multiple cameras swept the exterior. Uniformed guards were visible through the ground floor windows. A direct approach was impossible. He needed another way. His thoughts kept returning to the service entrances, the loading docks, the dumpsters, the parts of the park infrastructure he did have access to. Sanitation. Trash collection routes covered the entire park, including the areas behind the admin complex. Their route eventually took them back to the paddock outpost. The familiar dread returned as Mac unlocked the heavy steel door to Tunnel 7. Pip braced himself, gripping his flashlight tightly. "All right, let's make this quick," Mac muttered, flicking the switch. The lights flickered weakly, several bulbs still out from the previous night. "Ops, Mac, Pip, entering Tunnel 7. The radio crackled. "Acknowledged, Mac. Keep the channel clear if possible. Experiencing atmospheric interference." Burness's voice sounded tinny, distant. The descent began. The air felt colder tonight, the smell of decay sharper, less sweet, more acrid. Pip scanned the walls, the floor, the ceiling. He noted the loose vent cover again, the dark stain where the SD card had been. He half expected to hear the whispers, but the tunnel was eerily silent except for the constant dripping and the low hum of unseen machinery. The silence felt worse somehow, more expectant. Mac moved with forced efficiency, checking valves and gauges quickly, clearly wanting to finish the check as fast as possible. He didn't linger, didn't invite conversation. Pip followed closely, sweeping his light around, his senses straining against the oppressive quiet. As they neared the junction with the chute tunnel, Pip deliberately slowed his pace, letting Mac get a few steps ahead. He shone his light into the black opening. Nothing moved. He listened intently. No heartbeat sound tonight, just the profound, unnerving silence of the side tunnel. He felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the distinct feeling of being watched from that impenetrable darkness. He quickly moved on, catching up to Mac. They reached the rusted gate blocking the sewer access tunnel. Mac shone his light on the padlock, checked its solidity with a quick rattle, and turned to leave almost immediately. "All secure," he grunted. Pip lingered for a second, playing his own flashlight beam through the bars into the descending blackness below. Had the clanging sounds from last night just been a loose pipe? Or had something been down there trying to get through? The air wafting up from behind the gate felt cold, ancient, carrying a faint, truly nauseating stench that went beyond simple sewage. He backed away quickly. They walked back towards the ramp, the silence pressing in. Pip kept glancing at the pipes overhead, at the dark mouths of unexplored side tunnels. Every drip sounded like a potential footstep. Every shadow seemed poised to detach itself from the wall. Suddenly, a section of overhead pipe directly above them gave a loud groan, followed by a sharp crack. A shower of rust flakes and cold, slimy water rained down. Both men yelled in surprise, stumbling back. "Damn it," Max swore, wiping fetid water from his face. "See, told you, place is falling apart." He shone his light up at the pipe. A long, dark crack was visible, oozing water sluggishly. "That's gonna need a priority fix before it floods the whole damn tunnel." He pulled out his radio, shaking it slightly as if to clear the water. "Ops, Mac. We got a pipe burst, Tunnel 7, Section 4 Bravo. Need maintenance." The radio hissed static. "Say again, Mac. Your signal is breaking up. Pipe 7. Burness's voice was barely audible. "Pipe burst," Mac shouted into the radio. "Tunnel 7 near the sewer junction, requesting maintenance." "Acknowledged. Maintenance. ETA." The rest was lost in static. Mac lowered the radio, scowling. "Useless. Come on, let's get out of here before the ceiling comes down." He started up the ramp at a near jog. Pip followed, but his mind seized on an idea. A pipe burst, requiring maintenance. That meant maintenance crews would have to come down here. possibly day crews depending on priority. Maintenance personnel might have different access levels, different routines. They might even have legitimate reasons to be near the admin complex's service areas. As they reached the top of the ramp, Mac fumbled with the lock again, eagerness to leave making his movements jerky. Pip glanced back one last time into the gloomy tunnel. Near the spot where the pipe had burst, further down, he thought he saw movement in the deep shadows where the light barely reached. Not the towering silhouette from before, but something low to the ground. Something that skittered quickly out of sight like a large, pale insect or a deformed rabbit. He blinked and it was gone. Just shadows. Mac finally got the door open, and they practically fell out into the night air, slamming and locking the door behind them. Mac immediately lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply. "Okay," Mac said, his voice shaky despite his attempt at bravado. "That's it. I'm putting in for a transfer. This tunnel ain't right." He looked at Pip, his cynical facade completely gone now, replaced by raw fear. "You were right, kid. There's something down there. Pipes don't just burst like that, and did you see something move? Back by the leak?" Pip nodded slowly. Something low, pale, moved fast. Mac shuddered, running a hand over his face. "This place, Jago tried to warn me years ago, said things didn't stay buried. I thought he was just spooked." He took another shaky drag. "Listen, Pip, forget what I said. Be careful, seriously careful." They finished the rest of their shift in near silence, the shared fear now an acknowledged presence between them. Pip's mind, however, was working furiously. The burst pipe wasn't just another scare, it was an opportunity. Maintenance crews would be coming. They'd have tools, access, maybe even blueprints showing tunnel layouts beyond Sector 7. If he could somehow blend in with them or use their presence as a distraction. He started paying closer attention to the maintenance routines he observed during his own sanitation runs. He noted where their carts parked, which service entrances they used near the admin complex, the times they took breaks. A plan, fragile and incredibly risky, began to form. He needed a maintenance uniform. He needed to know their schedule for the Tunnel 7 repair. He needed to get near central processing during a moment of distraction or shift change. His best chance, he realized, might be during the day shift handover, a period of relative chaos when crews were coming and going. He could potentially use his own sanitation access to get near the admin building's rear service area, stash a borrowed maintenance jumpsuit, and wait for an opportunity. The burst pipe in Tunnel 7 might just provide the perfect distraction, drawing key personnel away from their usual posts. As the sky began to lighten, Pip felt a surge of nervous energy. He knew it was insane. He knew Jago would counsel against it. He knew Mac, despite his newfound fear, would report him instantly if he suspected. But the image of Sketch Corbin's unanswered forum post, the memory of the whispers, the glowing eyes, the thing skittering in the shadows, and the thought of the SD card locked away, it pushed him forward. He had to get that card. He finally saw a possible path, however dangerous. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would try. He just had to survive one more night shift, gather his nerve, and find a way to borrow a maintenance uniform without anyone noticing. Chapter 6: Borrowed Uniforms and Locked Doors. The final night shift before Pip planned his reckless attempt felt agonizingly long. Every routine task, emptying bins behind the pirate adventure ride, hosing down sticky residue near the Sugar Shack candy store, seemed amplified, distorted by his nervous anticipation. He watched Mac constantly, the older guard jumpy and irritable, muttering about leaky pipes and faulty wiring, his gaze flicking nervously towards dark corners. The shared fear was still there, but Mac seemed to be retreating into anger and denial again, channeling his terror into complaints about park management and equipment failures. Their mandatory check of Tunnel 7 was almost unbearable. Mac insisted they stand just inside the entrance ramp, shining their lights down into the gloom without descending fully. "Can see the pipe leak from here," Mac declared, his voice tight. "Water's pooling at the bottom. Maintenance job, not ours." He refused to go further, his hand hovering near the radio as if expecting an attack at any moment. Pip strained his ears, listening for whispers, for scraping, for the wet thudding heartbeat, but heard only the amplified dripping and the low hum that seemed to vibrate in his bones. The silence felt heavy, watchful. The darkness at the bottom of the ramp seemed absolute. They locked the door behind them with palpable relief. Mac didn't mention the transfer request again, perhaps realizing no other position in the park felt truly safe anymore. As dawn approached, Pip's focus shifted. While Mac finished the final paperwork in the operations shed, Pip made his sanitation rounds near the maintenance hub, a larger complex of workshops and garages hidden behind the Galaxy Zone sector. Day shift maintenance crews were arriving, parking their personal vehicles, heading towards locker rooms. Pip watched from a distance, partially concealed by stacks of landscaping supplies. He saw mechanics in grease-stained coveralls, electricians with tool belts slung low, plumbers carrying pipe wrenches. Their uniforms varied slightly, but most wore standard-issue dark blue work pants and shirts, or navy jumpsuits, often with the park's secondary M&O, Maintenance and Operations logo stitched on the breast pocket. His chance came unexpectedly. A maintenance cart, laden with plumbing supplies likely heading for the Tunnel 7 job, was left unattended near a side entrance to the workshop for a few minutes while the driver ran inside, perhaps for forgotten paperwork. Draped over a toolbox on the passenger seat was a folded navy blue jumpsuit. It looked worn, slightly oil-stained, perfect. Heart pounding, Pip glanced around. No one was watching. The early morning shift change created a natural flow of people, a low level of purposeful chaos. He walked quickly, deliberately towards the cart, trying to look like he belonged there, perhaps a sanitation worker coordinating with the maintenance crew. He reached the cart, snatched the jumpsuit, folding it quickly under his own arm, hidden beneath the loose gray polo he still wore. He turned and walked away, forcing himself not to run, heading back towards a secluded employee restroom block near the park's edge. He expected a shout, an alarm, but nothing came. Inside a stall, his hands shaking, he quickly shed his gray sanitation polo and pulled on the maintenance jumpsuit over his t-shirt and jeans. It was slightly too big, smelling faintly of oil and sweat, but it looked passable. He rolled up the sleeves and legs slightly. He stuffed his gray polo into his own backpack, which he then hid beneath a pile of discarded cleaning rags in the corner of the restroom, hoping it wouldn't be discovered before he could retrieve it. He took a deep breath. He was committed now. He spent the next few hours lurking, staying out of sight, moving through less trafficked service corridors he knew from his sanitation routes. He ate a squashed protein bar from his pocket, drank from a service tap. He monitored the radio chatter on the maintenance channel using a cheap handheld scanner he'd bought weeks ago for listening to emergency services, a purchase made out of boredom that now seemed prescient. He heard confirmation. A plumbing crew, Unit 3, was actively working on the pipe burst in Tunnel 7, paddock access. They reported difficulties with water pressure, needing additional parts from the main workshop. Perfect. That meant continued activity, distraction, personnel potentially being pulled away from other duties. Mid-morning felt like the best window. The initial rush of the day shift settling down, but before the lunch break lull. He made his way towards the rear of the admin complex, sticking to service roads screened by hedges and storage sheds. The fake city hall loomed ahead, its clean white paint looking sterile and imposing. He saw the loading docks Mac had mentioned, dumpsters lined up neatly, a few parked maintenance vans. He adopted what he hoped was a look of harried purpose, carrying a discarded length of PVC pipe he'd found like it was a crucial component. He walked towards the main loading dock, nodding curtly at a delivery driver unloading boxes. No one challenged him. The borrowed jumpsuit seemed to work as camouflage. Near the loading dock, a heavy service door stood slightly ajar, propped open with a rubber wedge, likely for ventilation or easy access for the delivery. Pip glanced around. Cameras were mounted high on the building corners, but their angles seemed focused primarily on the dock platform and vehicle approach, less on the door itself. This was his chance. Taking another deep breath, he adjusted his grip on the useless pipe segment and walked towards the propped door as if heading inside on official business. He slipped through the opening into a cool, brightly lit corridor. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reflecting off polished concrete floors. The air smelled clean, sanitized, a stark contrast to Tunnel 7's miasma. He quickly dropped the PVC pipe behind a stack of cleaning supplies just inside the door. He found himself in a service area, storage closets, utility panels, unlabeled doors. He needed to find central processing. He strained his ears, hearing the muffled sounds of office work, phones ringing, distant chatter, the hum of computers filtering down from upper floors. He walked further down the corridor, trying doors. Most were locked. One opened into a small break room, empty except for a coffee machine and a bulletin board cluttered with safety notices. Another opened into a janitorial closet, filled with mops and cleaning chemicals. He needed a directory, a sign, anything. He rounded a corner and saw it, a simple metal plaque on the wall with arrows, upper levels / offices, receiving / storage / central processing. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by renewed tension. He followed the arrow pointing right, his footsteps echoing slightly in the quiet corridor. The corridor descended slightly via a short ramp, leading to a heavier steel door marked basement-level storage. This door required key card access. Pip stared at the card reader, his heart sinking. This was it. His plan stalled. He couldn't get through without authorization. He leaned his forehead against the cool metal of the door, frustration and fear churning within him. He thought about turning back, retrieving his backpack, forgetting the whole insane idea. He thought about Sketch Corbin, lost somewhere in the dark tunnels below. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching from the corridor behind him. Quick, purposeful steps. He straightened up instantly, trying to look nonchalant like he belonged there, maybe waiting for someone. A man in a crisp white shirt and tie, carrying a thin file folder, rounded the corner. He barely glanced at Pip in his maintenance jumpsuit as he approached the key card door. "Morning," the man muttered distractedly, swiping his card. The reader beeped green and the lock clicked open. The man pulled the heavy door open and stepped through, letting it start to swing shut behind him. This was Pip's only chance. Acting on pure instinct, he lunged forward, catching the heavy door just before it latched. "Hold that," he called out, trying to sound like a maintenance worker with urgent business. The man in the shirt paused inside, looking back with mild irritation. "Got business down here." "Yeah, checking a conduit leak," Pip improvised lamely, slipping through the doorway. "Report came in." The man shrugged, apparently uninterested in the affairs of maintenance. "Right, watch the door." He turned and continued down the basement corridor, disappearing around another corner. Pip let the door click shut softly behind him, his heart hammering. He was in. He was in the basement level beneath the admin complex. The air here was cooler, smelling faintly of dust and old paper. More corridors branched off, lined with storage cages filled with old furniture, boxes of files, discarded computer equipment. Signs on the walls pointed towards archives, record storage, IT server room. He followed the signs, looking for central processing. The basement was quieter than the service corridor above, the silence broken only by the hum of ventilation and the occasional buzz of a fluorescent light fixture. He passed several more locked doors, his anxiety mounting. Was he on the right floor? Was central processing even down here? Then he saw it. At the end of a short, dead-end corridor. A single, heavy-duty door painted gray, distinct from the others. It had no window. Bolted beside it was a small, square metal sign with stark black lettering. Central Processing Evidence Intake/Storage Authorized Personnel Only. Below the sign was another key card reader and ominously a small, dark lens Pip recognized instantly. A security camera, aimed directly at the door. He froze, staring at the door, the sign, the camera. This was it. The place where the SD card was locked away. The camera lens seemed like a malevolent eye watching him, recording his presence. He could hear the faint hum of electronics from behind the door. He had no key card. Forcing the door was impossible without tools and making noise. He scanned the corridor. No other exits. No vents large enough to crawl through. He was standing in a dead end, directly observed by a security camera. Outside a locked room he had no legitimate way to enter. His borrowed uniform and flimsy excuse wouldn't hold up if someone official found him here. He took a step closer to the door, straining to hear anything from within. Silence. He reached out tentatively, touching the cold metal. Solid, secure, impenetrable. Suddenly, the key card reader beside the door beeped twice, rapidly. A small red light on it began to flash. Pip jumped back, his blood running cold. Had he triggered something just by being near it? Was it an alarm? He heard footsteps again, approaching quickly from the main basement corridor he'd come from. Not the slow pace of the office worker from before, but the heavier tread of security boots. Someone was coming. Someone knew he was here. He was trapped. Chapter 7: Conduit Leak. Panic seized Pip, cold and sharp. The approaching footsteps were steady, unhurried, the sound of someone responding to an alert, not chasing a fugitive. But the flashing red light on the reader beside the central processing door screamed discovered. He was trapped in the dead end, illuminated by the humming fluorescent tubes, directly under the unblinking eye of the security camera. His eyes darted around the short corridor. Storage cages lined one wall, filled with indistinct shapes draped in dusty tarps. Old computer towers lay piled haphazardly near the dead end. There was nowhere to hide effectively, not from someone actively looking. The camera had already seen him. Running back the way he came meant running directly towards the approaching footsteps. Think maintenance jumpsuit, conduit leak. His flimsy excuse to the office worker. Could he bluff his way through this? The footsteps stopped just around the corner at the entrance to the dead-end corridor. A figure appeared, a uniformed park security guard, younger than Mac, with sharp eyes and a hand resting non-threateningly near the radio on his belt. He wasn't running. He looked mildly curious, perhaps responding to the flashing reader light as a potential malfunction. The guard's eyes swept the corridor, landing on Pip standing awkwardly near the central processing door. He registered the maintenance jumpsuit. His expression shifted from mild curiosity to cautious inquiry. "Everything all right down here?" the guard asked, his voice calm, professional. He didn't step further into the corridor, maintaining his position near the corner. Pip forced himself to breathe, trying to channel an air of weary competence he definitely didn't feel. "Yeah, just checking this access point." He gestured vaguely towards the central processing door, then immediately regretted it. Wrong door. The guard raised an eyebrow slightly. "That's central processing, evidence storage, not usually accessed by maintenance. Problem." No, Pip corrected himself quickly, turning away from the evidence door towards the bare concrete wall opposite the storage cages. He pointed towards a junction box high on the wall near the ceiling. "This conduit." He rapped his knuckles against the metal casing. "Got a report. Possible water ingress. Basement level, admin block, near P-storage grid." He was making it up as he went, stringing together technical-sounding jargon he'd half heard on the maintenance radio. Just tracing the line back. The guard looked up at the conduit box, then back at Pip, his expression unreadable. The red light on the central processing reader continued its silent, insistent flashing. "That reader's acting up," the guard noted, nodding towards the evidence door. "Went into alert status a minute ago. You didn't touch it." "Nope," Pip said, shaking his head perhaps a little too vigorously. "Been over here checking the wiring feeds. Maybe the damp's getting into its circuits too." He tried to look thoughtful, concerned about park infrastructure. The guard considered this. It sounded plausible. Basement dampness causing electrical gremlins was common. He unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, Unit 12. Basement level, admin complex, central processing access." "Go ahead, Unit 12, Burness's voice, clearer down here than in the tunnels, crackled back. Reader panel on the CP door is showing an alert light, steady flashing red. No sign of tampering. Maintenance worker, he glanced at Pip, is present, checking adjacent conduits for water damage. Could be related. Pip held his breath. This was the critical moment. Would Burness or someone else check records? See that no maintenance ticket existed for this location. See that he wasn't supposed to be here. Acknowledged, Unit 12, Burness replied after a short pause. We've had intermittent electrical faults reported across the grid since that storm system moved in. Log the reader fault. Maintenance will add it to their list. Is the door secure? Affirmative, the guard confirmed, taking a step closer to visually inspect the central processing door seal. Door is secure. 10-4, proceed with your patrol. The guard clipped his radio back onto his belt. He looked at Pip again, the suspicion seemingly eased, replaced by routine procedure. All right. Well, if you find any significant water damage affecting security hardware, report it immediately. He gestured back towards the main corridor. I gotta continue my rounds. Will do, Pip managed, relief making his voice slightly shaky. Thanks. The guard gave a curt nod and walked back the way he came, his footsteps receding down the main basement corridor. Pip waited until the sound faded completely before letting out a long, slow breath, leaning his head against the cool concrete wall. He'd bluffed his way through. The borrowed jumpsuit, the mention of water damage, likely a common park complaint, and the fortuitous timing of wider electrical faults had saved him. But he was no closer to the SD card. The central processing door remained locked, the reader presumably logged as faulty but still functional, the camera still watching. He glanced up at the lens, feeling a renewed sense of being observed. He couldn't stay here. The guard might mention the encounter to a supervisor. Someone might check the non-existent work order later. His borrowed time was running out. He turned and walked quickly out of the dead-end corridor, back towards the service stairwell or loading dock. He needed to get out of the admin complex basement, ditch the jumpsuit, and become invisible again. The risk he'd taken had yielded nothing but a close call. As he passed the junction leading towards archives and record storage, he noticed another sign he hadn't paid attention to before, low on the wall. Tunnel access, emergency egress, only alarm will sound. An arrow pointed down a narrow, dimly lit side corridor he hadn't explored. Tunnel access. Here, beneath the admin building. He remembered his earlier speculation. Could the tunnel network connect this far? An emergency egress meant it wasn't a standard route, likely alarmed as the sign warned. But it was a potential way out, a way that didn't involve walking back through the service corridors where he might encounter more staff or security. He hesitated, trading the known risk of the upper service corridors for the unknown risk of an alarmed tunnel exit. He thought of Tunnel 7, the whispers, the scraping sounds, the thing Jago called residue. Were all the tunnels connected? Were they all equally dangerous? The thought of having to bluff his way past more employees, potentially explaining why he was leaving the basement without tools or a completed work order, decided it for him. He glanced back down the main corridor. Clear. He ducked into the narrow side passage indicated by the tunnel access sign. This corridor was different. Rougher concrete walls, bare bulbs casting dimmer light, a distinct subterranean chill in the air. It sloped downwards gently. After about 20 feet, it ended at another heavy steel door, this one painted faded safety yellow. A large lever-style panic bar spanned its width. A small, weathered sign above it read, "Emergency exit alarm will sound if OPENED." There was no key card reader, no visible lock mechanism on this side, just the panic bar. Pip stared at the door. Opening it meant triggering an alarm announcing his location, but it also meant escape from the admin basement. Where did it lead? Into another service tunnel, directly outside. He pressed his ear against the cold steel. He couldn't hear anything distinctly, perhaps just the faint, ubiquitous hum of the park's infrastructure. He took a step back, considering. If it led into another tunnel, could he navigate back towards a known exit point before security responded to the alarm? It was a huge gamble. He looked down at the borrowed jumpsuit. He couldn't risk being caught in this. Working quickly, he stripped off the jumpsuit, stuffing it into a dark corner behind some discarded ducting, hoping it wouldn't be found immediately. Now back in his jeans and t-shirt, he felt slightly less conspicuous, though his lack of any uniform might raise different questions if caught. He faced the yellow door again. The alarm was the immediate problem. Could he disable it? He examined the door frame, the hinges, the panic bar mechanism. No obvious wires, no external sensors he could tamper with quickly. The alarm was likely integrated into the door's locking mechanism on the other side or triggered by the bar's movement. He gripped the panic bar, cold metal under his sweating palms. He pushed slightly. It felt heavy, resistant. He thought about the consequences. Alarm blaring, security converging on this location. But staying in the basement felt equally dangerous now. He had no reason to be here, no alibi left. He made his decision. He took a deep breath, braced himself, and shoved the panic bar hard. The mechanism gave way with a heavy clunk. The door swung inwards, revealing not the outside world but darkness. Utter blackness, accompanied by a rush of cold, damp air carrying a familiar, stomach-churning scent. The unmistakable smell of Tunnel 7, the smell of decay and wet earth, but somehow stronger here, fouler. Simultaneously, a piercingly loud alarm klaxon erupted from somewhere above the doorframe inside the basement corridor he was leaving. Whoop, whoop, whoop. The sound was deafening, echoing relentlessly off the concrete walls. He didn't hesitate. He scrambled through the doorway into the pitch-black tunnel beyond, pulling the heavy yellow door shut behind him. The clunk of the latch engaging cut off the direct blare of the klaxon, though its urgent pulse still vibrated through the metal door, muffled but insistent. He was plunged into absolute darkness. The familiar tunnel smell was overwhelming. He fumbled desperately in his pockets for the small keychain flashlight he always carried, his fingers clumsy with adrenaline. He clicked it on. The weak beam barely penetrated the oppressive blackness, revealing rough-hewn rock walls, unlike the smooth concrete of Tunnel 7. This tunnel looked older, cruder, less maintained. Water dripped heavily nearby, echoing in the confined space. The muffled whoop, whoop, Whoop of the alarm behind the door was a terrifying countdown timer. Security would be heading for that basement corridor, would find the open emergency exit. How long until they reached this side? Which way should he go? The tunnel stretched ahead into blackness, and presumably back the way he came, though he couldn't see where it connected. He chose the direction leading away from the emergency door, deeper into the unknown. He stumbled forward, his small flashlight beam bouncing erratically, revealing nothing but endless, dripping rock walls and the uneven, debris-strewn floor. The air grew colder, the smell more intense. He thought he heard something ahead beyond the range of his weak light. A faint, rhythmic scraping sound. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. His blood ran cold. Was it the same sound he and Mac had heard in Tunnel 7? Or was it just rats disturbed by his sudden intrusion? He pressed onward, driven by the muffled pulse of the alarm behind him, towards the scraping sound ahead, plunging deeper into the uncharted darkness beneath the park. He hadn't gotten the SD card, but he had found something else. Proof that the tunnels stretched further, were perhaps more ancient than he ever imagined. And he was now lost within them, with an alarm sounding his presence and something scraping in the darkness ahead. Chapter 8: Echoes in Old Stone. The heavy yellow door slammed shut, its muffled clunk swallowed by the immediate, oppressive blackness and the stench of stagnant water and profound decay. Pip fumbled, adrenaline making his fingers clumsy, until the weak beam of his keychain flashlight sliced through the dark. It wasn't enough. The light seemed absorbed by the rough-hewn rock walls, revealing only a few feet of uneven, rubble-strewn floor before dissolving into impenetrable shadow. This wasn't like Tunnel 7's relatively smooth concrete. This was old, primitive, perhaps part of the original excavation before the park existed, or maybe an undocumented mine shaft swallowed by the park's construction. Behind him, the whoop, whoop, whoop of the triggered alarm pulsed through the steel door, a frantic heartbeat counting down the seconds until security arrived. He had to move, had to get away from the door. He plunged forward, away from the alarm, deeper into the unknown tunnel, his small light beam bouncing erratically. The floor was treacherous, littered with loose stones, slick patches of slime, and puddles of indeterminate depth. Water dripped incessantly from the low ceiling, the sound echoing strangely, multiplying in the darkness until it sounded like dozens of sources instead of just one. The air was heavy, cold, difficult to draw into the lungs, thick with the miasma of things left undisturbed for decades. He strained his ears over the diminishing alarm pulse and the constant dripping. The scraping sound he'd heard just before entering the tunnel was still there, somewhere ahead in the blackness. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. It was rhythmic, methodical, like something heavy being laboriously moved across the rock floor. It didn't sound like rats. It sounded bigger, more deliberate. Was it getting closer? He couldn't tell. The acoustics in the rough tunnel warped distances, made sounds seem simultaneously distant and unnervingly near. He moved faster, stumbling occasionally on loose rocks, his ankles twisting. His flashlight beam caught strange shapes on the walls, pale, calcified formations that resembled melting wax mixed with bone, clinging like grotesque fungi. Patches of absolute cold drifted through the tunnel, raising goosebumps on his arms despite the exertion. He imagined unseen fissures opening into deeper, colder parts of the earth. The muffled alarm behind him faded further, becoming a faint, almost subliminal throb, then vanishing entirely, replaced by the amplified sounds of the tunnel itself. The dripping water, the whisper of unseen air currents, and the persistent scrape, drag, ahead. Panic began to morph into a more primal fear, the fear of being utterly lost in crushing darkness with something unknown nearby. He had to be quieter. He slowed his pace, trying to place his feet carefully, avoiding the loose stones that skittered loudly when disturbed. The scraping sound seemed to maintain its distance, neither receding nor rapidly approaching. He advanced cautiously, sweeping his feeble light beam from side to side, trying to pierce the suffocating darkness. The tunnel curved slightly. As he rounded the bend, his light fell upon the source of the noise and he froze, his breath catching in his throat. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't Jago's residue-given form, at least not obviously. Partially blocking the tunnel ahead was a large, incredibly rusted metal object. It looked like a piece of discarded machinery, perhaps part of an old ride mechanism or a section of forgotten construction equipment. Twisted metal bars, gears frozen with corrosion, snagged cables, all fused into a vaguely menacing, abstract shape. And it was moving. Slowly, incrementally, the mass of rusted metal was dragging itself along the tunnel floor. Scrape, drag. The sound came from the rusted base grinding against the rock. There was no visible means of propulsion. No engine, no wheels turning, no figure pushing it. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, pausing for long seconds before lurching forward another few inches, scraping loudly against the stone. It seemed to be moving away from him, further down the tunnel, but its presence, its inexplicable animation, was deeply disturbing. Was this some ancient piece of park automation, still trying to perform a long-forgotten function? Or was something inside it, hidden within the tangle of rusted metal, pushing it along? Pip edged closer, staying near the tunnel wall, his light fixed on the impossible object. He could see thick trails in the grime and slime on the floor where it had dragged itself. As he watched, it gave another lurching shudder, scraping forward, then stopped again. A shower of rust flakes drifted down from its corroded surface. He felt an overwhelming urge to turn and flee back towards the emergency exit door, alarm or no alarm. But which way was truly safer? Back towards discovery by security or forward past this thing? He noticed a narrow gap between the scraping object and the tunnel wall on the left side, maybe wide enough to squeeze through. Staying as far from the rusted mass as possible felt imperative. Holding his breath, he flattened himself against the cold, damp rock wall and began to sidle past. The air near the object felt colder, and the smell of decay intensified, mingling with the sharp tang of rust. He kept his light pointed away from the core of the machine, afraid of what he might see if he illuminated the gaps within its structure. He focused on the path ahead, on the blessed darkness beyond the obstruction. Just as he drew level with the midpoint of the scraping mass, it gave another violent shudder, lurching sideways slightly, closer to his side of the tunnel. The gap narrowed. He sucked in his gut, pressing hard against the slimy wall, feeling loose rock crumble under his shoulder. A piece of jagged, rusted metal snagged his t-shirt, ripping the fabric. He stifled a cry, pulling himself free with a jerk. He scrambled the last few feet past the object, putting it behind him. He didn't look back immediately, half running, stumbling deeper into the tunnel, desperate to put distance between himself and the inexplicably moving scrap heap. The scrape, drag, sound resumed behind him, steady, relentless, unconcerned by his passage. He ran blindly for perhaps 50 yards before exhaustion and the treacherous footing forced him to slow down. He leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, listening. The scraping sound was fainter now, clearly behind him, still moving away. He hadn't been its target, it was just going somewhere, doing something. He pushed onward, the immediate terror replaced by a gnawing disorientation. How far had he come? Which way was the park? Was he heading deeper underground? The tunnel twisted again, then branched. A fork. One passage continued relatively straight, while the other veered sharply right, descending more steeply. Both were utterly black beyond the reach of his light. He had no idea which way to go. He shone his light down the right fork. It looked narrower, wetter, the dripping sound more intense. The main fork seemed wider, perhaps more traveled, though that meant nothing in this ancient place. He listened again. Faintly from the main, straighter fork, he thought he heard a low, intermittent humming sound. Different from the machinery hum near Tunnel 7, this was deeper, more resonant. Could it be ventilation equipment? A generator? Something that indicated proximity to the maintained sections of the park. He chose the main fork, drawn by the hope the humming represented. He walked cautiously, the tunnel floor seeming to level out slightly. The rock walls occasionally gave way to sections of crude brickwork, ancient and crumbling, suggesting past attempts at stabilization or modification. He passed alcoves carved into the walls, empty except for debris and thick cobwebs that snagged at his face. The humming grew slightly louder, seeming to vibrate up through the soles of his shoes. Good sign. Bad sign. He couldn't tell. Then his light caught something incongruous stapled crudely to the rock wall, a thick bundle of modern electrical cables, black and insulated, running along the tunnel ceiling. Hope surged through him. Modern wiring. This had to lead somewhere connected, somewhere maintained. He followed the cables, his pace quickening. They snaked along the ceiling, held by large metal staples driven into the rock, looking completely out of place against the ancient stone. The tunnel began to change. Sections of poured concrete appeared, patching the rock walls. The floor became smoother, more level, though still littered with dirt and pebbles. The humming intensified. He rounded another bend and stopped dead. Ahead, the old rock tunnel opened into a larger junction area. This space was clearly part of the modern service network. Concrete walls, brighter overhead lights, though several were flickering or burnt out. Junction boxes and pipes, lots of pipes, neatly labeled. It looked like a utility hub, perhaps connecting several different tunnel sectors. And directly across the junction from where Pip stood, maybe 40 feet away, was another heavy steel door. Not safety yellow, but standard gray. No panic bar, just a handle and a standard lock mechanism. It looked blessedly, hopefully normal, an exit from the old tunnels. But he wasn't alone. Standing near the center of the junction, seemingly examining a bank of pressure gauges on a large pipe, was a figure, tall, wearing dark clothing. For a heart-stopping moment, Pip thought it was security, somehow having cut him off. Then the figure turned slightly, profile visible in the flickering light. Pip stifled a gasp. It wasn't security, it was Jago. The old keeper stood stock still, his head cocked as if listening, his posture rigid. He wasn't looking at the gauges. He seemed to be staring intently down one of the other concrete tunnels leading away from the junction, not the ancient rock tunnel Pip had emerged from. What was he doing down here? How had he gotten here? Was he tracking Pip? Or was he down here for his own grim purposes related to the retirements? Pip ducked back slightly, pressing himself against the rough rock wall at the edge of the junction. Hopping the shadows concealed him. He watched Jago. The old man remained motionless for a long moment, listening. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned his head and looked directly towards the mouth of the rock tunnel where Pip hid. There was no recognition in his eyes, no surprise, just a flat, cold stare. It felt less like he saw Pip, more like he sensed his presence, an intrusion in this place he seemed to know so intimately. Jago didn't speak, didn't move closer. He just stared, his weathered face grim in the flickering utility lights. Then from the concrete tunnel Jago had been focused on came a sound. A wet, dragging shuffle accompanied by a low, guttural clicking. It was getting closer. Jago's gaze flickered away from Pip, back towards the approaching sound. He subtly shifted his stance, bracing himself slightly, his hand drifting towards a heavy wrench tucked into a loop on his belt. He still hadn't acknowledged Pip directly, but his focus was now entirely on the unseen thing approaching from the concrete tunnel. Pip was trapped between the unknown horror approaching Jago and the terrifyingly aware old keeper himself. The gray steel door across the junction seemed miles away. He could try to dash for it. Hopping Jago wouldn't stop him. Hopping the other thing wouldn't intercept him. Or he could retreat back into the ancient rock tunnel, back towards the inexplicable scraping machine, back into the darkness he'd just escaped. The shuffling, clicking sound grew louder, closer. A shadow stretched long and distorted from the mouth of the concrete tunnel, cast by the flickering lights. Pip pressed himself harder against the rock, his heart pounding, watching Jago, watching the encroaching shadow, paralyzed by indecision. Chapter 9: Carrion and Concrete. The shuffling grew louder, punctuated by sharp, wet clicks, like bones snapping or claws scrabbling on concrete. The shadow flowing from the mouth of the adjacent tunnel elongated, resolving into a horrifying shape as the creature dragged itself into the flickering light of the utility junction. Pip pressed himself so hard against the rough rock wall that sharp edges bit into his back. He barely registered the pain. His focus was locked on the thing emerging into the open space. It defied easy description, a nightmarish collage of animal parts seemingly fused together in agonized disarray. It was low to the ground, perhaps the size of a large pig, but its form shifted and writhed. Patches of matted, filthy wool clung to sections that looked like stretched hide, pulled taut over sharp, protruding bones, ribs, femurs, maybe splintered skull fragments. Several mismatched legs, some ending in cloven hooves, others in bare, twisted bone, jutted out at unnatural angles, dragging uselessly or scrabbling intermittently, producing the clicking sounds. It moved with a viscous, dragging motion, leaving a glistening trail of slime and filth behind it. There was no discernible head, just a roiling mass at the front where teeth, goat, sheep, pig seemed embedded randomly in rotting flesh, gnashing blindly. It pulsed slightly like a diseased organ. This was no echo, no mere residue. This was a physical manifestation of the paddock's grim harvest, animated and utterly vile. A carrion crawler born from the chute's depths. Jago stood his ground, facing the monstrosity. He didn't flinch as it dragged itself fully into the junction, its myriad textures glistening wetly under the buzzing lights. He held the heavy wrench loosely at his side, his knuckles white. His expression was one of weary disgust and grim determination. "Back," Jago said, his voice low and gravelly, echoing slightly in the concrete space. It wasn't a shout, but a firm command like one might use on a large, dangerous dog. "Get back down, not this way." The carrion crawler paused its forward motion, the random gnashing of teeth becoming more frantic. It seemed to sense Jago, orienting its amorphous front towards him. A low, bubbling hiss emanated from somewhere within its mass. It didn't seem intelligent, more like a concentration of pure suffering and corrupted instinct, drawn towards warmth, sound, life. Said, "Get back." Jago took a half step forward, raising the wrench slightly. He didn't advance further, maintaining a careful distance. He clearly knew not to engage directly if he could avoid it. This was Pip's chance. Jago and the creature were focused on each other. The gray steel door across the junction represented escape, salvation from this immediate horror. He risked a glance at Jago. The old man's attention was locked on the shuffling horror. Pip pushed himself off the rock wall. His sudden movement, the scuff of his sneaker on the concrete floor, drew the attention of both Jago and the creature simultaneously. Jago's head snapped towards Pip, his eyes widening fractionally in warning or surprise. The carrion crawler emitted a wet, gurgling shriek, and its form seemed to ripple, several of its useless legs twitching spasmodically. It began to turn its bulk, agonizingly slowly, towards Pip. Pip didn't wait. He bolted, sprinting across the open junction floor towards the steel door. The concrete felt slick underfoot near the creature's trail. He ran low, dodging a tangle of pipes bolted to the floor, his eyes fixed on the door handle. 40 feet felt like a mile. He heard Jago shout something behind him. "Pip, no, not that." But the words were cut off by another gurgling shriek from the carrion crawler, which seemed to lurch forward with surprising speed, not towards Pip, but cutting off Jago's potential path to intercept. Pip reached the door, fumbling for the handle. It felt cold, solid. He twisted. Locked. Of course it was locked. Panic surged anew. He rattled the handle uselessly. He glanced back. Jago was forced to step back as the carrion crawler lunged towards him, teeth gnashing blindly. Jago swung the wrench in a wide arc, not aiming to hit, but to ward it off. The creature recoiled slightly from the threat, hissing. Pip turned back to the door, scanning desperately. No key card reader, just a standard keyhole below the handle. Locked, trapped. He looked around the junction, back the way he came into the ancient rock tunnel. No, towards Jago and the creature. Definitely not. into the concrete tunnel the creature had emerged from, unthinkable. His eyes fell on a red metal box mounted on the wall beside the locked door, a fire alarm pull station. Below it, almost hidden by a low-hanging pipe, was something else, a small gray metal box with a hinged cover, labeled Emergency Door Release Tunnel Network. Hope flared again. He lunged towards it, flipping open the cover. Inside was a single, large red button protected by a clear plastic shield. The shield wasn't locked. He didn't hesitate. He flipped up the plastic shield and slammed his palm down on the red button. A loud buzz sounded from the lock mechanism on the steel door, and the handle clicked audibly. Simultaneously, a different alarm began to sound throughout the junction, not the piercing klaxon from the basement, but a series of loud, rapid electronic beeps, echoing down all connecting tunnels. Beep, 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 beep. He ignored the new alarm, grabbing the handle again, twisting. It turned freely this time. He yanked the heavy door open, revealing another concrete service tunnel, this one better lit, cleaner looking, stretching away into the distance. Escape. He scrambled through the doorway, turning to pull the door shut behind him. As it swung closed, he caught a final glimpse of the scene in the junction. Jago, wrench held ready, standing defensively as the carrion crawler reformed itself after recoiling, its attention seemingly drawn now by the flashing lights and beeping of the newly triggered alarm system. Jago met Pip's eyes for a fraction of a second across the space, his expression unreadable: anger, resignation, warning. Then the door slammed shut, cutting off the sight, muffling the beeping alarm. Pip leaned against the closed door, chest heaving, listening. The beeping was fainter here, but still audible. He was in another service tunnel. This one felt different from Tunnel 7, wider, cleaner floor, bundled cables running neatly along the walls in trays, brighter, steady, fluorescent lighting. It felt more modern, more actively maintained. Where did it lead? He checked the door from this side. No handle, no lock mechanism visible, just a smooth steel plate. It was likely an emergency exit from the junction side only, designed to prevent unauthorized entry into that utility hub. He was sealed off from Jago and the creature, for now. But the alarm was still beeping, albeit muffled. Security would be responding to this one too. Where had he emerged? He looked up and down the corridor. No signs immediately visible. He chose a direction, left, and started walking quickly, trying to put distance between himself and the door, hopping to find an exit or at least a designation marker before security arrived. He walked for several minutes, the tunnel curving gently. The beeping alarm faded behind him. The silence that replaced it felt less oppressive than in the older tunnels, just the low hum of electricity and ventilation. He passed several intersecting corridors, equally clean and well lit, some marked with sector designations he didn't recognize: Sector 4 Substation, Wastewater Relay West. He seemed to be in a completely different part of the park's subterranean network. He rounded another bend and saw something that made him stop. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a wider area, a sort of underground staging point. Parked against one wall were several electric service carts, identical to the one Mac drove. Charging stations hummed quietly. On the opposite wall were lockers and a door marked Employee Break Room. Further down, the tunnel continued, but Pip's attention was caught by something closer. Hanging on a hook near the parked carts was a familiar gray polo shirt, the standard Park Service's sanitation uniform. Beside it, leaning against the wall, was a large push broom and a wheeled sanitation cart, identical to the one he used. And sitting on the driver's seat of the nearest electric cart, looking directly at him with wide, terrified eyes, was a young man about his own age, wearing the same gray polo shirt. Another sanitation worker. The young man scrambled off the cart, stumbling backward, his face pale. Who are you?" he stammered, looking Pip up and down, nodding his street clothes, his dirt-streaked appearance. "You're not supposed to be down here. This is a restricted area. How did you get past the access point?" Pip held up his hands placatingly. "Easy, man. I work here, sort of got lost." It sounded incredibly weak even to him. "Lost?" The other worker looked terrified, glancing nervously back down the corridor Pip had emerged from, as if expecting something to follow him. "You came from Tunnel Junction 4 Delta, through the emergency release, the alarm." He trailed off, his eyes wide with dawning horror. You didn't see anything back there, did you? Hear anything?" What are you talking about?" Pip asked, though a cold dread was beginning to form. This worker seemed to know something. They say things get loose sometimes," the young man whispered, wringing his hands. "From the old sections, Junction 4 Delta, it connects to the deep network, the unmapped tunnels." He swallowed hard. "Old man Jago, he warns us. Don't go near those emergency doors. Don't listen if you hear things." He looked Pip up and down again, taking in his torn shirt, the grime, the wild look in his eyes. "What did you see?" Before Pip could answer, a crackle broke the relative silence. A radio, clipped to the young worker's belt, sputtered to life. All units, Burness's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the air. "Security alert active, Tunnel Sector 4, Vicinity Junction Delta. Emergency door release triggered. Proceed with extreme caution. Repeat, exercise extreme caution. Unconfirmed reports of containment breach." Containment breach. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Pip looked at the terrified young worker. The worker looked back at Pip, then glanced nervously towards the parked electric carts. "We need to get out of here," the worker whispered, his voice trembling. "Now." Chapter 10. Containment Breach. "Containment breach," the young worker echoed, his voice cracking. He stared at the sputtering radio clipped to his belt as if it had physically struck him. "Oh no, 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 no." He backed away further from Pip, stumbling against the parked sanitation cart. You came from there. Did you let something out?" "I didn't let anything out," Pip snapped, his own fear momentarily eclipsed by frustration. "There was a creature in the junction and Jago. He needed this kid's help, not accusations. Look, my name's Pip. I work sanitation too, night shift usually. I got turned around in the old tunnels after an incident." He gestured vaguely. "We need to leave, now, like the man on the radio said." The worker Pip saw his name tag now, partly obscured by a nervous hand clutching his shirt. Ravi looked unconvinced, terrified. "Jago, he was down there. He warns people, he says. He says the deep tunnels aren't stable. That things built into the foundations, things they buried when they built the park. They don't stay buried." Ravi's eyes were wide, darting between Pip and the tunnel entrance Pip had emerged from. "A creature, was it?" He couldn't seem to finish the question, shuddering violently. "It was bad," Pip said grimly. "Worse than you think, but it's behind a sealed door now. The breach. Maybe it's something else. Or maybe security just doesn't know what they're dealing with. Either way, staying here is suicide." He pointed towards the nearest electric cart. "Keys." Ravi patted his pockets numbly, producing a small key with a Park Services Unit 14 tag. We can't just take it," he stammered. "We're supposed to wait for instructions. Security." "Security said extreme caution," Pip countered, snatching the key. "That doesn't sound like they have things under control. Waiting here means waiting for whatever caused that breach to find us, or waiting for security to lock down this whole sector with us inside." He jumped into the driver's seat of Unit 14. The battery gauge showed nearly full. "Get in." Ravi hesitated for another second, torn between ingrained procedure and raw panic. The distant, muffled beeping from Junction 4 Delta seemed to echo faintly down the corridor, a reminder of the horror Pip had escaped. That decided it. Ravi scrambled into the passenger seat, pulling the door shut with a flimsy plastic clatter. Okay, Ravi said, his voice trembling. "Service ramp Charlie is closest. Should take us up topside near the Splash Kingdom loading docks. Go right at the next main intersection, then follow the Sector 4 West signs." Pip jammed the key into the ignition, turning it. The cart whirred to life. He stomped on the accelerator. The small electric vehicle zipped forward, its tires humming quietly on the smooth concrete floor. The bright fluorescent lights overhead created a strobe effect as they sped past. "Keep an eye out," Pip urged, glancing at the side mirrors, half expecting to see the steel door burst open behind them. "Security or anything else." Ravi nodded mutely, swiveling his head, peering nervously into the intersecting tunnels they passed. The clean, well-maintained corridors of Sector 4 felt deceptively safe after the ancient rock tunnel and the horror of the junction, but the radio alert hung heavy in the air. Containment breach. What did that really mean in a place built over decades of buried secrets and retired suffering? They reached the first major intersection. A large sign suspended from the ceiling indicated directions. Sector 4 North/Utility Hub Beta, a Sector 4 West/Ramp C/Waste Water Relay. "Right," Ravi confirmed, pointing. Pip swung the cart hard, the tires squealing slightly in protest. They sped down the Sector 4 West corridor. This tunnel seemed identical to the others: concrete pipes, bright lights. But Pip noticed subtle things. A flickering light fixture here and there. A low, intermittent buzzing sound that seemed unrelated to the cart's motor. A faint, unpleasant odor underneath the clean, circulated air, vaguely chemical, tinged with something organic and rotten. Was he imagining it, his senses overloaded from the earlier tunnels? Or was the breach affecting this sector too? Ravi suddenly gasped, pointing towards a dark observation window set high on the wall, looking into what might have been a control room or monitoring station. "The lights, they're off in there." Pip glanced up. The room behind the window was dark, unusual for a potentially active monitoring station. Had it been evacuated, or had the power failed? The radio crackled again, Burness's voice strained, cut by static bursts. "All, Tian Delta, negative contact. Unit 3, repeat, negative contact, plumbing crew. Pip's blood ran cold. Unit 3, the plumbing crew working on the burst pipe in Tunnel 7, the crew whose presence he'd hoped to use as a distraction. Negative contact. What had happened to them? Had the carrion crawler somehow reached them? Or was Jago's residue more active, more dangerous than just manifesting creatures? "Did you hear that?" Pip asked Ravi, his knuckles tight on the steering wheel. Unit 3. Ravi looked horrified. The maintenance guys, they were working near the paddock access. Oh gods! He covered his mouth, looking ill. Jago told us. He said the bad spots. They can spread if disturbed. Pip pushed the accelerator further. They needed to get out. The clean corridors of Sector 4 suddenly felt like a trap, the bright lights merely illuminating their vulnerability. Ahead, another intersection. The sign indicated Ramp C/surface access, with an arrow pointing left. "Left," Ravi almost shouted. Pip took the turn. This corridor sloped gently upwards. Ramp C, he could see the end of the tunnel ahead, maybe 100 yards away. It terminated in a large, roll-up metal security door, the kind typically leading to surface-level loading docks or garages. Freedom. But something was wrong. The main lights in this ramp section were out. Only emergency lights cast pools of dim, reddish illumination at long intervals. And halfway up the ramp, directly in their path, another electric service cart sat abandoned, skewed sideways, one door hanging open. It looked exactly like the maintenance cart Pip had stolen the jumpsuit from earlier that day. Pip slammed on the brakes, skidding the cart to a halt a safe distance from the abandoned vehicle. "What the hell?" That's one of the plumbing crew's carts," Ravi whispered, recognizing the unit number stenciled on its side. "Unit 3's backup cart. What's it doing here? Why is it sideways?" The abandoned cart sat in silence under the eerie red emergency lighting. Its headlights were off. There was no sign of the driver. A heavy pipe wrench lay on the floor near the open door, as if dropped hastily. "Where are they?" Pip breathed, scanning the shadows around the cart. "Why would they leave it here?" Maybe they made it out," Ravi suggested hopefully, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe they ran for the door." Pip pointed towards the large roll-up door at the top of the ramp. It was closed, completely shut, and the control panel beside it, usually showing a green, ready light, was dark. No power. "The door's dead," Pip said flatly. "No power. We can't open it." He looked back at the abandoned maintenance cart blocking the ramp, "and I don't think they just ran off." He switched off their cart's headlights, plunging them into the dim, red-tinged gloom of the emergency lights. Silence descended, broken only by the low hum of their own cart's ready state and the distant, almost subliminal dripping that seemed a constant feature of the entire tunnel network. Pip strained his ears. Was that shuffling, or just the echo of their own recent movement? Ravi whimpered softly beside him. "What do we do?" Pip stared at the abandoned cart, at the dark, unresponsive roll-up door. Ramp C was a dead end. The plumbing crew from Tunnel 7 hadn't made it out this way. Their cart sat abandoned, blocking the path, a silent testament to something. Something that had happened here, between the junction where the pipe burst and this failed exit. The radio crackled again, not Burness this time. A man's voice, panicked, breathless, cutting through thick static. Mayday, Mayday, Unit 7 security, admin complex basement, emergency egress breached from tunnel side, hostile, multiple. They're coming through the walls, requesting immediate. Ag. The transmission ended in a wet, choked gurgle and a burst of static. Pip and Ravi stared at the radio, then at each other, faces pale under the red emergency lights. The breach wasn't contained. It wasn't just the carrion crawler. It wasn't just in the old tunnels or Junction 4 Delta. Security was being attacked in the admin basement, near the emergency door Pip himself had used, coming through the walls. They were trapped on Ramp C, the way forward blocked, the exit powered down, and behind them, the park's subterranean nightmare was actively, violently spreading. Chapter 11, Scratching at the Walls. The choked gurgle and burst of static from the radio echoed horribly in the confined space of the cart. Coming through the walls. The phrase hung between Pip and Ravi, painting a picture far worse than a single escaped creature. This wasn't just a monster loose in the tunnels. The tunnels themselves, the very fabric of the park's underbelly, seemed to be turning hostile. Ravi made a small, strangled sound, pressing himself back against the passenger seat, his eyes darting wildly around the dimly lit ramp. Through the walls. What does that mean? What is that? I don't know, Pip admitted, his own fear a cold knot in his stomach. But it means the admin basement isn't safe. It means whatever Jago called residue is doing more than just making noise or animating things. It's breaking through. He killed the cart's motor, plunging them into near silence again, broken only by the faint emergency lighting hum and their own ragged breathing. We have to assume it can get anywhere. Maybe these clean tunnels aren't any safer than the old ones. He stared at the abandoned maintenance cart blocking the ramp ahead. Unit 3's backup cart. Silent, skewed, door open, pipe wrench on the floor. It looked like a scene interrupted violently. Stay here, Pip whispered, unclipping the heavy flashlight from the cart's dashboard charger. Keep the doors locked. If you see anything move, lean on the horn. Where are you going? Ravi hissed, his voice trembling. Need to see what happened up there. Maybe they found another way out. Maybe. He didn't finish the thought. Maybe they left clues. He slid out of the driver's seat, the flashlight beam cutting a sharp white cone through the ambient red gloom. He approached the abandoned cart cautiously, moving slowly, listening intently. The silence felt unnatural, heavy. He swept the beam across the concrete walls looking for. He wasn't sure what. Cracks, oozing residue, scratch marks. The walls looked solid, intact, stained only with grime and routine wear. He reached the maintenance cart. He shone the light inside the open driver's side door. Empty seat. The key was still in the ignition, turned to the off position. On the passenger seat lay a crumpled energy bar wrapper and a pair of greasy work gloves. Nothing seemed overtly disturbed inside the cab itself. He knelt, examining the heavy pipe wrench on the floor. It lay beside a dark, irregular stain on the concrete. Pip shone the light directly on it. Not oil, not grease. It was too dark, too thick, and already drying, flacking slightly at the edges. blood, a significant amount. His stomach churned. He followed the drag marks, faint smears mixed with the blood stain leading away from the open cart door towards the side wall of the ramp tunnel. The marks stopped abruptly at the base of the concrete wall. There was nothing else. No body. No sign of a struggle beyond the dropped wrench and the blood. Just the drag marks ending at a solid wall. Pip shone his light up the wall. Smooth concrete. No cracks, no holes, no obvious way anything could have been dragged into it. He ran his hand over the surface. Cold solid. He knocked on it. Dull thud. It didn't sound hollow. He felt a prickling sensation crawl up his spine, coming through the walls. Had the plumber been dragged into the concrete? The idea was insane, impossible. But the evidence, blood, drag marks, stopping dead at an intact wall. He heard a faint noise, a soft, rhythmic scratching. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. It wasn't coming from behind him where Ravi waited. It wasn't coming from the abandoned cart. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall he was examining, close, just beneath the surface. He pressed his ear against the cold concrete, holding his breath. The scratching was clearer now. Faint, dry, persistent, like fingernails or claws digging slowly, patiently from the other side of solid concrete. He recoiled from the wall as if burned, stumbling backward, his flashlight beam dancing wildly. "Ravi!" he whisper-shouted, his voice hoarse with terror. "Get ready to move." He backed away towards their own cart, his light still fixed on the spot on the wall where the scratching originated. As he watched, a thin, dark line appeared on the concrete surface, like a crack forming in real time. It spiderwebbed outward slowly, accompanied by a low grinding sound, as if immense pressure was being applied from within. Dust trickled from the growing fissure. "Pip, what is it?" Ravi called, his voice high with panic. "It's the wall," Pip yelled, scrambling back towards their cart. "It's coming through the wall." The grinding intensified. More cracks spread across the concrete near the base, coalescing around the area where the drag marks ended. A chunk of concrete the size of Pip's fist suddenly bulged outward, then crumbled, falling to the floor with a soft thud, revealing absolute blackness within the wall's thickness. The scratching sound became louder, wetter, accompanied now by a faint, repulsive sucking noise. Pip dove into the driver's seat, jamming the key Ravi had given him back into the ignition. "Go, go, go," Ravi screamed, pointing frantically back down the ramp the way they'd come. Pip didn't need telling. He slammed the cart into reverse, stomping on the accelerator. The cart shot backward down the ramp, away from the abandoned maintenance vehicle and the horrifyingly active wall. Pip risked a glance in the side mirror. He saw something pale and segmented, like a giant grub or a tangle of thick white worms, beginning to squeeze its way out of the newly formed hole in the concrete wall where the plumber had presumably vanished. Grave soilers. Thriving on decay, burrowing through earth and concrete, drawn by violence, by blood. He spun the wheel, executing a sharp three-point turn in the confined space of the ramp, tires squealing, then gunned the engine forward, back towards the intersection leading to Sector 4 West. The ramp was no longer an option. The plumbing crew hadn't escaped. They'd been absorbed. "Where do we go?" Ravi yelled over the whine of the electric motor. Back towards the junction, towards Jago, towards that thing. No, Pip shouted back. The radio call said the admin basement was breached too. That way's probably compromised. He thought furiously, scanning the tunnel walls as they sped back towards the main Sector 4 West corridor. The other intersections. Did you see any signs for ventilation shafts, maintenance ladders, anything leading up besides the main ramps? Ravi shook his head frantically. I don't know, I just know the main routes. Maybe utility hub beta, back the other way. Pip remembered the sign at the first intersection. Utility hub beta had been one of the options. Maybe a hub had more access points, more potential escape routes. It was a gamble backtracking deeper into the sector, but Ramp C was death, and the admin complex sounded like it was being overrun. They reached the intersection again. Pip slowed slightly, checking both ways. The main corridor stretched ahead, back towards Junction 4 Delta where he'd encountered Jago and the carrion crawler. To the left was Sector 4 North and Utility Hub Beta. The air drifting from that direction seemed cleaner, the low buzzing sound he'd noticed earlier slightly more pronounced. Left, Pip decided, wrenching the wheel, towards the hub. They raced down the Sector 4 North corridor. The buzzing grew louder, resolving into the distinct hum of heavy electrical equipment. Ahead, the tunnel widened, opening into a large, brightly lit chamber filled with transformers, circuit breaker panels, and thick bundles of cables snaking across the ceiling and down the walls. Utility Hub Beta. Several other tunnels converged here, marked with different sector designations. But something was immediately wrong. The main lights in the hub flickered erratically, much worse than anywhere else they'd been. Sparks showered intermittently from a large transformer near the center of the room. The air hummed not just with electricity, but with a palpable tension, a feeling of overloaded circuits and imminent failure. And slumped against a bank of circuit breakers, partially hidden by shadows, was a figure. Pip slowed the cart, approaching cautiously. It was another park employee, this one wearing the dark blue jumpsuit of an electrician. He wasn't moving. His head was slumped forward onto his chest, tool belt askew, a pair of wire cutters dangling limply from one hand. "Hello," Pip called out tentatively, stopping the cart a safe distance away. "Are you all right?" The figure didn't respond. Pip shone the flashlight beam directly on him. The electrician's eyes were wide open, staring blankly ahead, pupils massively dilated. His skin was pale, clammy-looking. There were no obvious injuries, no blood. But his mouth hung slightly open, and a thin trickle of dark fluid, almost like oil or ink, leaked from the corner of his lips and trailed down his chin. He looked like he'd been scared, literally, to death. Or maybe electrocuted internally, despite the lack of burn marks. "Is he?" Ravi whispered, horrified. Before Pip could answer, a loud clang echoed from one of the converging tunnels leading into the hub, not the one they'd just arrived from. This was followed by a series of rhythmic metallic impacts. Clang, 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 getting closer. Pip looked at the dead electrician, at the sparking transformer, at the new, menacing sound approaching from another tunnel. Utility Hub Beta wasn't a sanctuary. It was another failing node in the park's collapsing subterranean nervous system. "We can't stay here," Pip said urgently. backing the cart away from the dead electrician. Which tunnel did that sound come from? Ravi pointed a trembling finger towards a tunnel marked Sector 5 Access/East Grid. That one. The clanging was louder now, closer. It sounded like heavy metal striking metal, deliberate, forceful. Pip looked at the other tunnels leading out of the hub. One was marked Tunnel 7 Emergency Connection, absolutely not an option. Another led back the way they came. That left one other choice, a narrower tunnel, poorly lit, marked only with a faded, almost illegible sign that might have once read Old Pneumatic Transport Decommissioned. It looked ancient, unused. That one, Pip pointed towards the decommissioned transport tunnel. It's the only way the sound isn't coming from. Decommissioned, Ravi squeaked. It might be unstable, collapsed. Better than waiting for whatever is making that noise. Pip gunned the engine, steering the cart towards the narrow, dark opening of the old pneumatic tunnel, just as the rhythmic clanging reached the entrance to the hub from the Sector 5 tunnel. They didn't see what was making the noise, but the sound itself, heavy and relentless, spurred them onward into the unknown darkness of the abandoned passage. Chapter 12: Pneumatic Ghosts. The cart plunged into the narrow mouth of the decommissioned pneumatic tunnel, the abrupt transition from utility hub beta's flickering brightness to near-total darkness momentarily blinding. Pip flicked the cart's headlights back on, revealing a passage drastically different from the clean concrete corridors they'd just fled. This was tight, clearly not designed for vehicles this size. The walls were grimy, curved metal, ribbed like the inside of a giant metal snake. The outer casing of the old pneumatic transport tube system itself, repurposed as a rough service tunnel after the tubes were presumably removed. The air was thick with dust and the smell of stale, stagnant air, overlaid with a faint metallic tang. Debris littered the floor, rusted metal fragments, broken bits of tile or concrete, thick drifts of gray dust that puffed up around the cart's wheels. The electric cart, designed for wider service corridors, scraped against the curved metal walls as Pip navigated forward, the sound loud and jarring in the confined space. Behind them, the rhythmic metallic clang, 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 echoing from the utility hub faded quickly as Pip steered the cart deeper into the pneumatic passage, the tunnel curving slightly, cutting off the direct line of sound. Relief was minimal. The silence that replaced the clanging was dense, broken only by the cart's whining motor, the scrape of its sides against the metal walls, and the unsettling creaks and groans of the ancient structure around them. "Are you sure this goes anywhere?" Ravi whispered, huddled in the passenger seat, his eyes scanning the grimy walls as if expecting them to peel open. Pneumatic systems. They were mostly for documents, small parts transfer between admin and maybe workshops. Might just dead end. "It was the only way that wasn't actively trying to kill us," Pip retorted, wrestling with the steering wheel as the cart bumped over a particularly large piece of debris. Looked like a buckled section of the original inner transport tube itself, never fully removed. "We keep going until it stops. Then we figure something else out." Progress was slow. Pip had to drive cautiously, anticipating obstacles hidden in the thick dust, constantly correcting the steering as the cart scraped and bumped against the confining walls. The headlights cut a short, inadequate swathe through the gloom, reflecting dully off the corroded metal. Water dripped sporadically from joints in the curved ceiling, creating slick patches on the floor that threatened to send the cart skidding. They passed occasional side alcoves, dark recesses that might have once housed junctions or maintenance access points for the pneumatic system. Most were empty, filled with shadows and cobwebs thicker than blankets. In one, Pip's headlight beam caught a brief glimpse of something huddled in the corner, looked like a pile of discarded rags, maybe an old mattress. He didn't slow down to investigate. Vagrants sometimes found their way into the park's less secured peripheries, but finding one this deep, in a decommissioned tunnel miles from any obvious entry point. The implication was unsettling. Was it recent? Or had someone been down here a long, long time? Further on, the graffiti started. Not the usual spray-painted tags found in accessible service areas. This was different, scratched crudely into the grime and rust of the metal walls, illuminated briefly by the headlights. Symbols Pip didn't recognize, jagged spirals, eye-like shapes with too many radiating lines. And words, single words repeated obsessively. Hunger, below, teeth, always. And chillingly, scratched over and over again near a particularly dark water stain dripping down the wall. JAGO knows. What is this? Ravi breathed, pointing a trembling finger at the graffiti. Who would come down here to write this? Someone who knew the tunnels, Pip muttered grimly, remembering Jago's warnings, his intimate knowledge of the darkness. Someone who spent too much time listening. The graffiti felt less like vandalism, more like desperate warnings or fragments of madness scrawled by someone losing their grip. The buzzing sound that had been present in the utility hub seemed to follow them faintly into this tunnel, a low, subliminal hum beneath the cart's noise. Pip initially dismissed it as residual sound, but it seemed persistent, almost seeming to resonate through the metal walls of the tube tunnel itself. He remembered the dead electrician, the sparking transformer, the trickle of dark fluid. What had killed him? Was it related to the breach? Or was it something else entirely, native to the park's overloaded, failing electrical grid? The tunnel began to slope downwards more noticeably. The air grew damper, the dripping more frequent. Ahead, the headlight beam illuminated a shimmering curtain across the passage, water cascading heavily from a large rupture in the ceiling joint, pooling ankle-deep on the floor. "Can we get through that?" Ravi asked nervously, eyeing the deluge. "Have to," Pip said, gritting his teeth. He slowed the cart, then pushed the accelerator, hitting the waterfall with a splash. Icy water sprayed into the cab, soaking them instantly. The cart's motor whined in protest as the wheels spun momentarily in the deeper water before finding purchase. They emerged on the other side, dripping and cold, the sound of the cascade echoing behind them. Just beyond the waterfall, the tunnel ended, abruptly, not in a cave-in or a deliberate bulkhead, but at a wall of crude, crumbling brickwork, clearly added long after the original pneumatic tunnel construction. It looked ancient, stained, and unstable. There was no door, no obvious continuation. A dead end. Pip stopped the cart, cutting the engine. The sudden silence was broken only by the rush of the waterfall behind them and the relentless dripping from the ceiling nearby. He killed the headlights too, plunging them into darkness save for the faint red glow of the dashboard lights and the weak beam of the flashlight he still held. "Bricks," Ravi whispered incredulously. "Why would they brick it up? Where does it go? Or where does it keep things from?" Pip countered, thinking of the graffiti, the warnings. He got out of the cart, shivering in his soaked clothes, and approached the brick wall, playing his flashlight beam over it. The mortar was crumbling, loose in many places. Some bricks were missing entirely near the base, revealing darkness behind them. The low buzzing sound seemed slightly stronger here, emanating subtly from the brickwork itself. He knelt, peering into one of the gaps near the floor. He couldn't see much, just rough earth and stone beyond the brick layer. But he felt a faint draft of cold, foul-smelling air pushing out. And he heard something else. Faint, intermittent, almost lost beneath the sound of the waterfall behind them. A tiny electrical crackling sound. PZT, PZT, PZT. Like static discharge or faulty wiring arcing somewhere in the void beyond the bricks. He shone the light back along the tunnel they'd traveled. Had anything followed them? The clanging hadn't returned, but the silence felt fragile. The image of the grave soiler emerging from the concrete wall on Ramp C flashed in his mind. Could something burrow through this crumbling brickwork too? "We have to get out of the cart," Pip decided. "If something comes from behind, we're trapped in it. And maybe there's a way through this." He gestured at the decaying wall. They climbed out, taking the heavy flashlight and Ravi's radio. The keychain light Pip had used earlier was long dead. They stood shivering in the damp chill, listening. The waterfall hissed behind them. The bricks seemed to hum faintly with that low buzzing. The intermittent crackling persisted from beyond the wall. Pip examined the brickwork more closely. It wasn't structurally sound. It looked like a hasty, crude barrier, not a permanent seal. Using the butt of the heavy flashlight, he experimentally tapped one of the looser bricks near the base. It shifted easily, mortar crumbling away. He worked it back and forth, then pulled. It came free with a gritty screech, revealing more darkness and rubble behind it. "Help me," Pip urged Ravi. Hesitantly, Ravi joined him. Working together, they pulled away several more bricks near the bottom, creating a small opening, maybe 2 feet wide and a foot high, leading into the space beyond. The foul draft intensified, carrying the smell of damp earth, ozone, and something else. Something vaguely like burnt hair. The electrical crackling was louder now, coming definitely from within the opening. Pip shone the flashlight through the gap. It revealed a narrow crawl space, choked with dirt, rocks, and tangled roots. But weaving through the debris, pulsing with a faint blue light, were cables. Not the neat, modern bundles from the utility corridors, but older, cloth-insulated wires, cracked and frayed in places. The blue light emanated from points where the insulation had failed, arcing faintly against damp earth or exposed rock. PZT. Crackle. PZT. Faulty wiring, Ravi breathed, recoiling slightly from the opening. "That's dangerous, could start a fire, or—" He didn't finish, but Pip understood. "Or electrocute anyone trying to crawl through." "Does it look like it goes anywhere?" Pip asked, trying to see deeper into the crawl space. "Can't tell, just dirt and roots and those sparking wires," Ravi shuddered. "This feels wrong, Pip. Maybe we should go back, face whatever was in the hub." Whatever was in the hub sounded like it could tear through metal, Pip countered. "And remember the electrician. This." He shone the light on the sparking wires again. "This is dangerous, yeah, but maybe it's a way up. Roots mean we're closer to the surface." He looked back down the dark pneumatic tunnel. "And I don't want to be here if that scraping machine from the old tunnel or the thing making the clanging noise decides to come exploring." He made his decision. "I'm going to try it, stay back from the wires, move slow." He got down on his hands and knees, aiming the flashlight beam into the crawl space. "Give me the radio. You keep the light. Shine it where I'm going. If you see me get lit up, run." Ravi looked terrified but numbly handed over the radio. Pip clipped it to his belt. Taking a deep breath, smelling the ozone and decay, Pip lowered himself into the narrow opening, scraping his shoulders on the rough bricks. The crawl space was tight, damp earth pressing in on both sides. He started forward, moving painstakingly slowly, trying to avoid touching the sparking, cloth-covered wires that snaked through the debris like luminous blue tripwires. The crackling sound filled his ears. The faint blue light cast eerie shadows on the roots and rocks ahead. He advanced inch by agonizing inch into the electrifying darkness, beyond the bricktop pneumatic tunnel. Chapter 13. Pneumatic Ghosts. The crawl space pressed in on Pip immediately, a suffocating coffin of damp earth, sharp rocks and tangled roots. The air was thick, tasting of decay, ozone, and the metallic tang of rust from the pneumatic tunnel behind him. He moved by inches, his shoulders scraping against the rough brickwork of the opening, then against packed dirt and protruding stones. The weak beam of the flashlight, wielded by a presumably terrified Ravi back in the tunnel, cut through the oppressive darkness ahead, illuminating the treacherous path. His world shrank to the small circle of light and the immediate space around his body. Every movement was calculated, agonizingly slow. The primary danger was the ancient wiring snaking through the debris like malevolent blue veins. Cloth insulation, cracked and peeling, exposed sections of bare wire that sparked intermittently against damp soil, rocks, or grasping roots. PZT. Crackle. PZT, PZT. Each spark, though tiny, felt like a gunshot in the confined silence, a potential jolt of lethal electricity inches from his face or hands. The faint blue glow pulsed irregularly, casting eerie, dancing shadows that made the roots look like grasping fingers and the rocks like leering faces. He tried to control his breathing, aware that hyperventilating would only heighten the claustrophobia. Inhale the foul air slowly, exhale even slower. He focused on the path immediately ahead, identifying the next safe place to put his hand, the next patch of clear earth to push his knee onto. Dirt packed under his fingernails. Sharp stones dug into his kneecaps through his jeans. A thick, hairy root snagged his already torn t-shirt, forcing him to pause and carefully untangle himself. Heart pounding, convinced for a moment it was something grabbing him. "How's it look?" he called back, his voice tight, muffled by the close confines. Ravi's voice returned, thin and strained, echoing strangely from the tunnel opening. Tight, Pip, really tight, the wires. They're everywhere. There's a big cluster just ahead of you by that thick root." Pip squinted into the light beam. Ravi was right. A knot of frayed cables lay directly across his path, several points sparking rhythmically. PZT, PZT, PZT. It looked like the main feed for whatever archaic system this wiring belonged to. There wasn't enough clearance to go over it safely, and burrowing under it risked disturbing the damp earth they rested on, potentially shifting them into contact. "Can I go around?" Pip asked. "Left side looks, maybe," Ravi sounded uncertain. "There's a big rock, sharp edges. Right side is just more wires, thicker ones." Pip edged cautiously to the left. The space narrowed further here, forcing him to turn his head sideways, his cheek scraping against cold, damp earth that smelled faintly of mildew. He stretched out a hand, feeling for the sharp rock Ravi mentioned. His fingers brushed against its jagged surface. He carefully pulled himself forward, inch by painful inch, keeping his body as far from the sparking cluster as possible. A particularly bright spark flared from the wires, accompanied by a louder crackle, and Pip flinched violently, banging his head against an overhead root. Stars momentarily burst behind his eyes. "You okay?" Ravi called out, the flashlight beam wavering nervously. "Yeah, fine," Pip gasped, rubbing his head. He paused, catching his breath, listening. The buzzing hum that had permeated the utility hub and the pneumatic tunnel felt stronger here, deeper within the crawl space. It wasn't just audible. It felt like a physical vibration in the earth around him, in the fillings in his teeth. And the crackling. It wasn't just coming from the exposed wires anymore. It seemed to be whispering from the very air, a dry static rustle just beyond the range of hearing. He pushed the unsettling sensation away. Focus. Get past the wires. He resumed his slow crawl, squeezing past the sharp rock, feeling its edge scrape against his ribs. Finally, he was beyond the sparking cluster. He paused again, breathing heavily. "Okay," he called back. "Past the worst of it, what's ahead?" "Looks a bit clearer," Ravi replied, his voice still tight with fear. "Less wires, more roots though, and it looks like the crawl space might open up a bit, maybe 20 feet ahead. Can't quite tell." Encouraged, Pip pushed forward with renewed determination, though his muscles ached and the constant tension was exhausting. The crawl space remained tight, but the immediate threat of electrocution seemed slightly lessened, replaced by the thick, grasping roots he had to push through or wriggle under. The buzzing vibration persisted, seeming to thrum in rhythm with his own pulse. The faint static crackle whispered around him. He thought he saw movement in the beam ahead, a flicker low to the ground near a dense patch of roots. "Ravi, did you see that?" "See what?" "Just aiming where you're going." Pip squinted. "Nothing, just shadows cast by the roots. Nerves, must be nerves, but the feeling of being watched intensified, not by human eyes but by something ambient, pervasive. The buzzing felt like scrutiny. The crackling felt like anticipation." He crawled another 10 feet. The space did seem to be widening slightly, the ceiling lifting by precious inches. He could almost straighten his neck. The air felt marginally fresher, though still thick with the smell of damp earth and ozone. The sparking wires were less frequent here, though the buzzing was definitely louder, the static crackle more insistent. Then the flashlight beam ahead flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely, plunging Pip into absolute, disorienting blackness. "Ravi," Pip yelled, his voice cracking with sudden panic. "Light, what happened?" Silence. Then Ravi's voice, high-pitched with terror, echoed from the tunnel opening far behind him. "Pip, it just died. The flashlight, it's dead. I didn't do anything." Total darkness pressed in on Pip, absolute and suffocating. He couldn't see his own hands in front of his face. The buzzing seemed to swell in the absence of light, filling his ears, vibrating through his bones. The static crackling intensified, no longer faint whispers but sharp, distinct pops surrounding him in the black. PZT. Crackle. Pop. Like tiny electrical insects swarming in the unseen air. "Ravi, are you still there?" Pip shouted, trying to keep the panic from overwhelming him. Yeah, I'm here." Ravi's voice sounded distant, terrified. "Pip, get out of there. Something's wrong. The air feels weird out here too, like before lightning." Pip fumbled at his belt for the radio, his fingers numb and clumsy in the dark. He had to tell Ravi to run, to get back to the cart, to abandon him if necessary. He thumbed the transmit button. "Ravi, run, get." The radio emitted a single, deafening burst of static, so loud it felt like a physical blow to his ear. Then silence. Dead. He tried transmitting again. Nothing. The radio was as dead as the flashlight. He was alone, in total darkness, in a tight crawlspace deep underground, with wiring that had somehow killed the flashlight and radio from a distance. The buzzing intensified further, becoming a low, guttural thrum. The crackling pops grew louder, closer. PZT crackle, PZT pop. He froze, every nerve ending screaming. He could feel something coalescing in the darkness just ahead of him. Not something solid, but a concentration of the buzzing, crackling energy. A patch of air that felt colder, denser, vibrating with contained power. He remembered the dead electrician, the trickle of dark fluid, the overloaded feeling in the utility hub. Was this related? A pneumatic ghost born from the decay of the old system, fueled by the failing grid. An entity of pure, malevolent static. A faint, shimmering blue light flickered into existence a few feet ahead of him in the crawlspace. Not the steady glow of the sparking wires, but a diffuse, amorphous shape composed of dancing electrical sparks, roughly humanoid in its upper dimensions, but dissolving into crackling tendrils below. It had no discernible features, just shifting patterns of blue static, but Pip felt an overwhelming sense of dead-eyed observation emanating from it. The buzzing sound seemed to originate directly from its core. It drifted slightly closer, the crackling intensifying, the smell of ozone sharp and burning in Pip's nostrils. He scrambled backward instinctively, forgetting the crawlspace's confines, his back hitting the dirt wall hard. He was trapped. No light, no communication, and a being of pure electrical malice manifesting in the darkness ahead. He could hear Ravi shouting his name frantically from the tunnel opening, the sound distant, almost irrelevant now. Pip squeezed his eyes shut, then forced them open again. Hopping the apparition was just a hallucination born of fear and darkness. It wasn't. The shimmering blue static form remained, hovering, buzzing, crackling. And then it spoke, not with a voice but with a sound transmitted directly inside Pip's skull, a synthesized wave of static and hum that formed distorted, terrifying words. "Feed the line. Hungry circuits. Join the current." The blue shape drifted closer still, extending a crackling tendril of pure static towards Pip's face. He could feel the hair on his arms standing on end, the fillings in his teeth vibrating painfully. He recoiled, pressing himself as flat against the crawlspace floor as possible, dirt filling his mouth. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The pneumatic ghost, the hungry static, reached for him in the suffocating dark. Chapter 14. Static Bloom. The tendril of crackling blue static lashed out, not with physical substance, but with an invasive, predatory energy. Pip flinched violently, squeezing his eyes shut, pressing himself flat against the cold, damp earth of the crawlspace floor. He threw his arms over his head in a useless gesture of protection. The buzzing swelled into a deafening roar inside his skull, drowning out Ravi's distant, panicked shouts. The smell of ozone burned his nostrils raw. Current must flow. The static voice hissed in his mind, no longer words but pure, agonizing command. Circuit complete. He felt the tendril touch his arm, even through the fabric of his t-shirt. It wasn't heat or cold in the conventional sense, but a searing wrongness, an electrical violation that bypassed nerves and struck deeper, into the marrow of his bones. Pain exploded behind his eyes, white-hot, consuming. His muscles convulsed uncontrollably. The static wasn't just touching him. It felt like it was trying to enter him, to merge with his own bioelectrical field, to make him part of its hungry circuit. He tasted copper, felt the fillings in his teeth vibrate so intensely he thought they would shatter. Images flooded his mind, disjointed, terrifying, flickering schematics of the park's power grid overlaid with pulsing organic shapes, glimpses of the dead electrician's wide, staring eyes, the sensation of burrowing endlessly through cold earth, the gnashing teeth of the carrion crawler, the hollow echo of the chute in Tunnel 7. It was the park's pain, its failing systems, its buried horrors, all channeled through this entity, seeking an outlet, a ground, a victim. Just as the unbearable pressure reached its peak, just as Pip felt his consciousness fraying, dissolving into the roaring static, the crawlspace itself seemed to react. The intense energy discharge from the pneumatic ghost overloaded the already unstable environment. With a tremendous crack and a low, tearing groan, the ceiling of the crawlspace directly above Pip gave way. A torrent of earth, thick roots and fist-sized rocks rained down, striking Pip's back and head. The impact was brutal, driving the air from his lungs, but the sudden chaos, the physical violence, momentarily disrupted the entity's connection. The searing pain in his arm lessened slightly, the mental roar receding to a furious buzz. The blue static form flickered erratically, its shape distorting as debris rained through it. Instinct took over. Survival. Buried under the falling earth, Pip clawed frantically upwards towards the source of the collapse. His hands found thick, tangled roots amidst the loose soil. He pulled, scrambled, digging himself out from under the debris that had momentarily saved him. Above, where the ceiling had been, there was now a ragged hole, choked with more roots and earth, but through it, unbelievably, filtered the faintest suggestion of gray, ambient light. Not the harsh fluorescence of the tunnels, but the dim, diffused light of outside. He ignored the pain radiating from his arm, the throbbing in his head, the grit in his eyes and mouth. He pulled himself upwards into the breach, tearing through roots, digging into the loose soil like a burrowing animal. The buzzing static entity seemed momentarily confused by the collapse, flickering uncertainly below him in the darkness of the crawlspace. He didn't look back. Soil gave way to thick, fibrous turf. He clawed through it, breaking the surface, gulping in air that tasted blessedly clean, blessedly free of ozone and decay. He dragged himself the rest of the way out, collapsing onto soft, damp grass. He lay there for a moment, gasping, muscles trembling uncontrollably. His body screamed from exertion, from the electrical assault, from the impacts of the falling debris. His left arm felt numb, tingling violently from where the static tendril had touched him, the skin beneath his torn sleeve an angry red, strangely cold to the touch. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up, spitting out dirt. He looked around, trying to get his bearings. He was outside, topside, but where? He was in a flower bed. Lush, green foliage surrounded him, dotted with brightly colored, eerily perfect-looking flowers, the park's meticulous landscaping. He'd emerged from the earth like a worm, right into the middle of an ornamental garden bed. Towering over him, just a few feet away, was the base of a large, whimsical statue, one of the park's signature cartoon characters, rendered in painted fiberglass, its grinning face seeming to mock him in the pre-dawn gloom. He looked back at the hole he'd crawled out of. It looked like nothing more than disturbed soil and broken roots amongst the flowers, easily mistaken for damage caused by burrowing animals or recent planting. There was no sign of the crawlspace below, no hint of the electrical nightmare he'd just escaped. He listened. The park was quiet, too quiet. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gray, but the usual sounds of early morning park operations, the leaf blowers, the maintenance carts, the distant testing of ride mechanisms were absent. An unnatural stillness hung over the grounds. He couldn't hear any alarms. He couldn't hear Ravi shouting. Where was Ravi, still trapped in the pneumatic tunnel? Had he run? Pip scanned the area. He recognized this section of the park, near Founders Lane, not far from the admin complex he'd fled hours ago. He could see the fake City Hall building rising nearby, its windows dark. Had the breach been contained there? Had the security unit calling Mayday survived? He got shakily to his feet, his body protesting every movement. He needed to find help. He needed to find Ravi. He needed to report what he'd seen, what he'd experienced. He stumbled out of the flower bed onto a brick pathway. That's when he saw them. Scattered across the pathway, lying amidst the perfect landscaping, were bodies, park security uniforms, maintenance jumpsuits, maybe half a dozen figures sprawled in unnatural positions, motionless. No obvious signs of violence, no blood like near the abandoned cart on Ramp C, just stillness. Their faces, visible in the growing light, were pale, eyes wide with frozen terror, mouths slightly open. Some had the same thin trickle of dark fluid, leaking from their lips that he'd seen on the dead electrician in the utility hub. Overwhelmed by the static, victims of the containment breach. A low humming sound reached him, growing steadily louder. Not the electrical buzz from the tunnels, but the whine of an approaching electric vehicle. He ducked behind the cartoon statue, peering out cautiously. A single security cart approached slowly down Founders Lane. Its headlights were off. It moved with an unnerving steadiness. Pip expected to see Mac, or maybe the young guard from the admin basement, but the figure behind the wheel wasn't security. It was Jago. The old keeper drove slowly, his face grim, illuminated by the dashboard lights. He wasn't looking for survivors. He wasn't patrolling. He held something in his lap, a small, crudely made cage woven from wire and twigs. Inside the cage, something pale and multi-legged twitched feebly. Beside him on the passenger seat lay the heavy wrench Pip had seen him wielding in the junction, stained dark near the head. Jago seemed to be methodically checking the bodies scattered across the path, his expression unreadable, before continuing his slow progress down the deserted lane. Was he cleaning up, assessing the damage, or was he somehow involved, a shepherd guiding the park's nightmare? Pip watched, frozen behind the statue, the questions piling up. Where was Ravi? What had happened to the plumbing crew? What was the full extent of the breach? What were the static entities? What was Jago's true role in all this? The escape from the crawl space wasn't an ending. It was just a transition to a different, more widespread horror playing out under the bruised dawn sky. The park above ground was no safer than the tunnels below. The containment breach was not over. It felt like it was just beginning. The end.